He crouched down, picked up a layer of sand from the ground, and rubbed it a bit. The sand contained some tiny eggs left by a desolate beast, not yet fully hatched. The soil here was no different from that of other areas in the outer desolate territory, uniquely common and not directly utilizable. This is strange. Xiang Beifei had not detected anything unusual about the mountain. He rode his sword away from the mountain and scrutinized it from different angles in the air. He understood the principle that things vary with the perspective from which they are viewed, so he checked from every possible direction. But it seemed he could not discern anything. It was too normal. Anyone passing by would treat it as an ordinary mountain. I have investigated many times. Xiao Shang's voice came from the foot of the mountain, more than 300 meters below. What are your thoughts? Asked Xiang Beifei. The old man must have forgotten something, perhaps before his amnesia. Smashing this mountain was his last memory. So every time he tries to remember something, he comes here to strike it, said Xiao Shang. But other shattered mountains do not reassemble, Xiang Beifei remarked. Just now, they had destroyed the nearby mountain ranges, and the only one that reassembled was this mountain. Or perhaps it serves as a place for him to vent his emotions, added Xiao Shang. Watching this mountain for so many years just to smack it? Xiang Beifei asked. What a deep-seated grudge that must be. Xiao Shang was unable to answer because Xiang Qingde did not appear to be such a person. Moreover, it seemed unnecessary to specifically travel thousands of miles just to vent emotions. Xiang Beifei flew around the entire mountain, circling it over and over, from the peak to the foot, clockwise and counterclockwise, trying all manners of flying. Yet he discovered nothing. Have you tried smashing this mountain? Xiang Beifei landed and asked Xiao Shang. Why would I smash it? To replicate the experiment? Xiang Beifei suggested. He did not have the power to smash the mountain, but Xiao Shang did. Xiao Shang considered Xiang Beifei's words. He had indeed never done that. In his previous investigations, he had used more methods than Xiang Beifei could think of, but he had never thought to smash it himself. In his opinion, the mountain's secrets could only be uncovered if it remained intact. If it were destroyed, how could the investigation continue? You have the power, right? Xiang Beifei asked. Smashing a mountain of this scale is not an issue, but are you sure you want to do this? It has already been destroyed 6 times. One more won't hurt. Xiang Beifei seemed indifferent. Xiao Shang nodded slightly. Your approach is quite extraordinary. He did not reject the idea but raised a blue mist, pushing the old gentleman beside Xiang Beifei, and said, Keep your distance. Xiang Beifei would have done that anyway. Xiao Shang leaped into the air, with powerful spiritual power gathering in his hand. Whoosh! The air around him surged violently, converging toward him, forming a mighty vortex. Then he fiercely struck down towards the mountaintop with a palm. Bang! The palm strike thundered, echoing loudly, carrying a momentum that could obliterate anything, and it instantly slammed into the mountaintop. Such terrifying force could have flattened any mountain in the cultivated domain. However, when Xiao Shang's spiritual power hit the mountain, it was like a stream of water hitting a soft sponge. The mountain absorbed all the spiritual power without a trace. The entire mountain remained unmoved. Xiao Shang was quite astonished. He actually couldn't destroy the mountain. It should be noted that he was a god-refining early-stage martial artist, and with such strength, destroying the mountain, if not with one palm, should at least obliterate half of its peak, or at the very least break a few rocks. How can this be? Stunned, Xiao Shang looked at the high mountain and swung another palm strike at it. Bang! The mountain remained steadfast. Xiang Beifei stroked his chin, pondering something. Why don't you try? Said Xiao Shang. Xiang Beifei shook his head. It seems pointless, it probably can't be smashed. Then how did the old gentleman smash it? Xiao Shang looked at the still unconscious Xiang Qingde. Xiang Qingde had indeed shattered the mountain several times over. I don't know. Xiang Beifei shook his head. Xiao Shang frowned. You don't seem very surprised by this situation. How do you think I should react? Xiang Beifei retorted. Xiao Shang looked at Xiang Beifei thoughtfully but did not ask further. Xiang Beifei remained silent, continuing to ponder a question. When Xiao Shang slapped down just now, logically, the spiritual power should have whipped up the dust. But when his spiritual power touched the mountaintop, the soil on the mountain seemed to have a strange consciousness that swallowed up Xiao Shang's spiritual power. To shatter this great mountain, the amount of spiritual power required was quite enormous. Yet the surging waves of power were devoured by the soil. He had seen this situation once before. At the mountain in the withered forest, he had defeated a team of Ghost Mustache of Remnant Visage led by Shi Renmei, relying on the backwards flowing stream on the mountain. There, the stream had the ability to devour everyone's spiritual power, not even sparing Xiang Beifei's. But the mountain was influenced by the stream, while this mountain seemed to be influenced by the soil. To confirm this, Xiang Beifei specifically grabbed a handful of soil and channeled his spiritual power into it, and the soil continued devouring his spiritual power. He pondered for a moment, then carried the soil into the sky. About 100 meters away from the mountain, he channeled spiritual power into the soil again, and it lost its devouring ability. Indeed, the strangest part lay within this mountain. The mountain in the withered forest was the same. Once the stream left the mountain, it turned into an ordinary stream, losing its devouring abilities, and the soil from this mountain underwent the same transformation upon leaving the mountain. The only difference was that the stream in the withered forest would devour upon mere contact, but the soil from this mountain didn't devour spiritual power by mere touch. Xiang Beifei refocused his gaze on the mountain, which was much smaller compared to the mountain in the withered forest, yet it was so bizarre. Is there any connection between this mountain and the one in the withered forest? Xiang Beifei was baffled. The two of them had lingered in this place for a long time, trying various methods to destroy the mountain, but it remained unscathed. It seemed only the grandfather had the ability to shatter this mountain. But at that moment, Xiang Beifei suddenly turned his head and saw a beam of light flow from the grandfather's system interface. Before he could react, the system opened a vortex and swept the grandfather into it. Whoosh! The grandfather disappeared on the spot. Xiang Beifei was slightly stunned. He must have gone home. Xiao Shang found this not unusual, and skillfully stored his all rivers run into sea. Xiang Beifei contemplated for a moment, looked at the mountain once more, confirmed its position, then said, "We need to go back." Whether it was true or not, he needed to make sure his grandfather was safe. The two quickly left the mountain and rushed back to the Jizhou continent. It took Xiang Beifei an hour to get home, and seeing the grandfather lying on his bed, lightly snoring, looking like he was just sleeping, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. "He always does this," Xiao Sheng said. "What's your next step?" Xiang Beifei asked. "I don't know." Xiao Sheng shook his head, looked at Xiang Beifei and at Xiang Qingde lying on the ground. "What was will still be. So you're going back to the store?" "I should," Xiao Sheng said. After a moment of silence, Xiang Beifei said, "Thank you. Do you believe what I said?" "I can't find a reason not to," Xiang Beifei said. "Thanks for looking after my grandfather." "No need." Xiao Sheng shook his head. "The old man has a deep understanding of life. He embodies a positive spirit that allows me to see hope in life and understand the meaning of my existence. He had no close relatives, was a very introverted person, not willing to express his emotions. He had been investigating his master Qin Hongyi's case for several years without any results, which caused him great tension. Enjoy exclusive content from Novelbin.com. But Xiang Qingde was a very optimistic old man. Optimistic people often have a way of influencing those around them. "Besides, your father once saved me, and I'm just repaying him," he added. "Do you know where my father went?" "Not sure. When he was a pioneer, he and I weren't in the same team," Xiao Sheng said. Xiang Beifei did not ask further. "Tomorrow, I'll be back at the restaurant." With that, Xiao Sheng turned and left. Cultivated domain on the mountain that had just materialized, two figures appeared abruptly. A man and a woman, frowning as they surveyed the scene before them. The man was dressed in a trench coat, covering himself thoroughly. On his body were some twisted ripples, obstructing the view, making it impossible to discern their depth. But if Xiang Beifei were here, he would have definitely recognized this man. Qin Hongyi. By Qin Hongyi's side was another woman with short hair, wearing a tight-fitting outfit, her figure very agile. She looked quite young, only around 20 years of age. It indeed looks like a battle took place here. I told you there was something off about this place. The short-haired woman seemed very excited, sticking out her tongue and licking her lips, her eyes gleaming with a fanatical light. Qin Hongyi spoke indifferently. God refining level experts, at least 4 of them. He lifted his head to see the tall mountain as if he had discovered something, then took a step forward, vanishing on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already standing on the lonely mountain peak, surveying the mountain and the surrounding desolate landscape, frowning slightly. "Strange," he said. "What's wrong, Chief?" the short-haired woman inquired. Qin Hongyi walked to the edge of a ravine, inspecting a cut mark and said, "This cut mark is from that Sioux person Keishi wielding a sword." "Keishi? That guy?" The short-haired woman carefully examined the cut mark on the ravine, exclaiming in surprise, "Who did the Sioux people fight with? Was it our people?"
No.
Qin Hongyi crouched down to look at the terrain of the area. Even though grass and trees had started to grow in many places, you could still vaguely see some traces. "It seems Keishi did not gain any advantages," he added. "Now that's interesting. Who else would dare to take on a Sioux person like that, besides our own people?" The short-haired woman chuckled lightly. But Qin Hongyi seemed to have discovered something else. He crouched down and ran his hand over a rock, then stood up again, saying, "It's him again. Stay connected via Freeweb novel." "Who?" the short-haired woman asked with a smile brimming with playfulness. Qin Hongyi didn't answer, seemingly lost in thought. The short-haired woman's eyes emitted a strange light, and she licked her lips again. "This is so exciting. If it's a martial artist driven to desperation by a Sioux person, I can't wait to recruit him into our ranks." She stretched lazily, fiddling with a golden cage in her hand that held a bell, jingling with sound. "We unrestrained don't turn away any visitors," she said with a cheerful laugh. After Xiang Qingde woke up, he didn't remember anything, no matter how much Xiang Beifei questioned him. He felt as though he had just had a sleep. How could I, with my old arms and legs, possibly go to the uncivilized areas beyond the domain? Xiang Qingde waved his hand dismissively. "Then what does grandfather remember?" Xiang Beifei asked. Xiang Qingde rubbed his forehead, saying, "It feels like I had a dream. My head hurts a little. When I was in the shop, my system displayed some strange characters. I thought something was wrong, like a brick falling on me. But strangely, I only heard some sounds." "What did you hear?" Xiang Beifei immediately asked. Xiang Qingde carefully recalled, then hesitated, looking at his blank system screen without answering right away. Xiang Beifei pressed, "Is grandfather holding back something?" Xiang Qingde shook his head and looked toward the wall, saying, "It might be just my imagination." Xiang Beifei followed his gaze to the wall, where a family portrait hung, showing the 4 of them in the picture. He realized something and asked, "Was it my father's voice?" "It was both of their voices," Xiang Qingde said. Xiang Beifei was taken aback. "What did they say?" "I didn't hear it clearly. It was something about a direction." Xiang Qingde shook his head, then laughed. "It must be just my imagination. How could they talk directly to me?" It had been almost 5 years, and he had come to terms with the fact that his son and daughter-in-law had died in the wilderness outside the domain on an expedition. Therefore, he simply took these voices as hallucinations from missing his family too much. But what if it isn't just imagination? What if they are crying for help or for some other reason? Xiang Beifei said seriously, "Asking for my help? But what can I do for them?" Xiang Qingde waved it off, not taking Xiang Beifei's words to heart. "I can't help them." Xiang Beifei handed his grandfather the video on his phone, saying, "Then how does grandfather explain this?" Xiang Qingde took Xiang Beifei's phone, glanced at the video, and then his eyes widened in shock. In the video, he stood in the air and, with a slap, shattered the large mountain. He incredulously extended his own hand, sizing up his palm, and said, "Is my hand really that powerful? I can't even shatter this mountain," Xiang Beifei said. "My old arms and legs can shatter a mountain?" Xiang Qingde was in continuous amazement, and as if to test his own strength, he slammed his palm forcefully down on the table. Bang! Hiss! Xiang Qingde sucked in a breath of cold air. His palm was red from the slap. Yet the table was unharmed. Only the cups on the table were knocked over. "You didn't splice some movie footage into a video as a joke, did you?" Xiang Qingde hissed in pain, continuously shaking his hand. Xiang Beifei looked at his grandfather, a touch of amused exasperation on his face. After a long while, he fell into deep thought. The video was certainly no fake. Grandfather had indeed gone to the wilderness outside the domain. That much was certain. When he was in Kong Daming's shop, a line of text appeared on grandfather's system interface, and then he disappeared. All the evidence was there. The problem was, grandfather seemed not to remember anything about it. According to Xiao Shang, the same incident had occurred 6 times. But grandfather had forgotten all 6 times. Stay tuned with Freeweb Novel. What on earth was going on? All right, stop joking with grandfather. I'm getting on in years and can't keep up with you young people's pace of life. Xiang Qingde glanced out the window and said, "It's already dark. I forgot to cook dinner. You must be hungry, right? I'll go cook right now." He chuckled as he stood up and went to the kitchen to get busy. Xiang Beifei watched his grandfather's retreating figure. He did not believe that his grandfather was hiding anything, but that he truly had forgotten something. But what could be causing him to forget those things? Yuho North 30, is that a direction? Xiang Beifei pondered the mountain that his grandfather often flattened with a slap and thought back to the mountain in the withered forest he had seen before. Coincidence? Or the center of the Zhuzhou continent is the safest place, where desolate beasts from beyond the borders can never reach, and even if the border defenses are breached, it would take a long time for the desolate beasts to arrive here, as they might be intercepted on the way. Many residents yearn to move to this place, yet the sight of the housing prices here leaves many N-level awakeners feeling powerless. N-level awakeners might never afford even a square meter of land here in their lifetime. To own a home here, one usually needs to be of at least S-level cultivation. The place is under strict control, with mandatory registration upon entry and an enforced time limit for staying. It can be said that the center of the Zhuzhou continent is a gathering ground for high-level awakeners, and living here is definitely a symbol of status. And the Alliance Hotel located here is the most luxurious in all of Zhuzhou. The hotel building is 100 stories tall, soaring into the sky, majestic and imposing, glittering with gold, a symbol of luxury and nobility. Many powerful and influential figures like to conduct business here. At this moment, on the highest floor of the Alliance Hotel, 2 people were standing on a balcony, gazing into the distance. These were 2 figures of great significance within the Alliance. The Commander-in-Chief of the Alliance Beast-Tide Defense Department, He Kaiwei. The other person was an old man with sparse hair who looked quite ordinary, but his eyes exuded a solemn killing intent, and his powerful aura was barely concealed. "There's no news from those 3. He Kaiwei spoke in a low voice. Even the self-important He Kaiwei had to speak respectfully in front of this elder. For this elder was none other than the person in charge of the Su Alliance, a UR-level figure, Zhu Yiji. In the whole alliance, only a few could match Luo Yunxian in combat power, and Zhu Yiji was one of them. Both being UR, He Kaiwei was nothing in front of Zhu Yiji and Luo Yunxian. But what He Kaiwei had was ambition. Only something had gone wrong with the task this time. He couldn't get in touch with Lu Shanghui and the other 2. He didn't even know where exactly they went. No news? Then they're probably dead. Zhu Yiji leaned on the railing, looking out into the distance with an indifferent tone, as if the life and death of these 3 god-refining stage experts were of no consequence to him. He Tsaiwei's expression stiffened. The 3 SR awakeners might not be very important figures, but their misfortune indicated something was amiss with this operation. They tracked Xiang Beifei to the wilderness beyond the cultivated domain, and that's when we lost contact. I only found where Lu Shanghui fought, but there's no trace of eternal sleep and Keishi. The wilderness beyond the cultivated domain was vast and the terrain complex. Hikaiwei had been there the day before. The fight took place in the cultivated domain, which had the lowest danger level, and where many martial artists trained. At that time, they heard some noises but couldn't locate the source. Was it Luo Yunxian who made a move? By the time I got there, the wilderness beyond the domain had been restored, or rather, someone had covered up that place, severely disrupting the battlefield, making it impossible to discern what the fight was like. But for 3 god refining stage experts to perish, it could only be an instant kill. Hikaiwei frowned. Despite being a UR-level expert with top-tier investigative skills, even he couldn't discern the details of Lu Shenghui's combat situation. Being able to instantly kill 3 god refining stage cultivators, their strength must be extremely formidable. The latest news showed Xiang Beifei had already returned home, so it was almost certain that these 3 were slain by Luo Yunxian. It seems that Luo Yunxian has indeed been protecting him all along, Zhu Yiji said slowly. Fortunately, Luo Yunxian should be unable to act. Lu Shenghui is dead, and those 2 Su people surely won't talk. Luo Yunxian has no proof. He should not be able to find us here, Hikaiwei said. He had dared to let Lu Shenghui make a move precisely because of this certainty. After all, Lu Shenghui was the younger brother of Lu Xingdong, and it wouldn't be strange for him to want to kill Xiang Beifei in an emotional outburst. The blame wouldn't fall on him. Humph, Zhu Yiji said coldly. Hikaiwei hesitated before asking, "So what do we do next? The scene has been destroyed too severely. We have no way to prove that these 3 were killed by Luo Yunxian. We can't pin this crime on him. Take your time. There will be plenty of opportunities." Zhu Yiji looked down from the skyscraper. The red lights and green wines sparkled under the starlight, a bustling urban night scene blooming with prosperity. He relished this lofty feeling, as if the people below were all crawling under his feet, controlled by him. Hence, he didn't like uncontainable elements. Those like Luo Yunxian and Xiang Beifei must be nipped in the bud. Xiang Beifei didn't investigate further and spent the following time working on his meridian opening. Since his last encounter in the outer domain wilderness with those 2 Su individuals, he realized his current strength was utterly insufficient to intervene in more affairs. His confrontation with the Su people relied on the power of the Do constellation, not his own strength. Relying on the Do constellation was very risky, because each time the Do constellation was covetous and not very restrained. During the battle, he was unable to fully control the Do constellation but merely allowed it to act freely, resulting in him often being unable to fight according to his own will. He had decided he wouldn't venture out recklessly or investigate matters related to Qin Hongyi, nor give the Alliance any more opportunities until he reached the God-refining stage himself. Once he reached the God-refining stage, perhaps he could see Hikaiwei's system interface, and then he would be able to deal with that guy. Xiao Sheng returned to the banquet at Kong's mansion. He was still the diligent Xiao Zhang, running errands behind Xiang Qingde, always following the old man's instructions and eager to take on any task. The old man was truly someone who lived life, radiating an optimistic spirit. Xiao Sheng seemed to have become much more cheerful in his company. Xiang Beifei didn't know if Xiao Sheng was pretending to be cheerful and enthusiastic or if he was actively trying to become that way, but if the Alliance sought to trouble the old man, Xiao Sheng would likely step in. As for the incidents involving the 3 god refining stage Su individuals and Lu Shenghui, it was an event the Alliance should have taken seriously. Xiang Beifei didn't concern himself with any reaction from Hikaiwei, but it seemed Hikaiwei had not sought further trouble. Xiang Beifei being alive sounded an alarm for Hikaiwei, who might not fear Xiang Beifei himself but certainly feared the people behind him. If one assassination attempt failed, Hikaiwei knew Luo Yunxian would become suspicious, and attempting a second strike in a short period would be akin to delivering another head on a platter. Furthermore, they couldn't prove that it was Xiang Beifei who killed the 3 god refining stage experts, which was something Hikaiwei had arranged privately. He couldn't afford to make a fuss about it when things went wrong. In order to continue meridian opening, Xiang Beifei returned to school. On one hand, it offered the convenience of consulting Elder Luo when faced with difficulties, and on the other, it let everyone know he was at school. A college student staying at home would surely raise many suspicions. He had to let the Alliance know his whereabouts so they would focus their attention on him. Just to be safe, he left Xiaohei with his grandfather. Xiaohei had been guarding his grandfather for those 2 months. It usually had nothing to do anyway, just sleeping and lazily taking delivery of the occasional package. He himself was cultivating day and night. By the beginning of April, he finally advanced his cultivation to the later stage of meridian opening, having fully opened all his meridians. After opening the meridians, the next realm of cultivation to consider was God refining stage. How can I cultivate a spiritual soul? Xiang Beifei pondered this question. He had already witnessed the existence of spiritual souls, as every God refining stage martial practitioner had one, indicating that cultivating a spiritual soul was an essential step for the God refining stage. Yet at this stage he seemed to find no clues. It was then he envied those with systems. People with the system have every step of their realm breakthrough meticulously planned out by the system. All they need to do is complete tasks, accumulate system points, and with those in hand, reaching the God refining phase is just a matter of consuming a God refining pill. However, such system items like the God refining pill are of no use to Xiang Beifei. His method of cultivation differs from others, and the coalescence of his soul can only rely on himself, not system items. Luckily, his fortune is rather good, as he has at least a group of seniors present. When Xiang Beifei went to find Elder Luo, he discovered Elder Luo was absent, but he saw Professor Guo Zhenghong, who also seemed to be looking for Luo, and Enshiyu was with him too. Since the start of term, Xiang Beifei occasionally asked for leave, missing many classes. But the teachers haven't said much, as the school's courses are prepared for the Qi-controlling phase students. Normally, S-ranked Awakeners can graduate once they reach Meridian opening phase, while R-ranked Awakeners can graduate after reaching the latter stages of Qi-controlling phase. But for someone like Xiang Beifei, who reached Meridian opening phase despite being N-ranked, those courses have long been irrelevant. He is now studying at the school as an advanced student. It's not every day I get to see you, kid. I thought it would take an application form to meet you. Professor Guo laughed. You flatter me, Professor. I have merely been busy with cultivation. Xiang Beifei politely responded. Professor Guo praised Xiang Beifei and asked, Speaking of which, I can't quite see through you these days. Just what level has your cultivation reached? Xiyu finally stepped into the later stages of meridian opening just yesterday. Hearing this, and Xiyu looked at Xiang Beifei, her gaze flickering slightly. She was an SR Awakener, and among all the SR Awakeners, she possessed a particularly top-tier talent, having started cultivating a whole year earlier than Xiang Beifei. Her awakening system had been activated for 2 years, and in that time she had become a martial artist in the late stages of meridian opening, an SR with extremely high talent. Of course, the late meridian opening stage does not mean the meridians were completely opened. There were still some left to open. At her rate of progress, in about half a year, she would fully open the remaining meridians, reaching great perfection of the late meridian opening phase, and then complete the system tasks to break through to the God refining phase. If all went well, she had the potential to become a martial artist in the God refining phase within the next 2 years, which means, from activating her awakening system to reaching the God refining phase, it would take her roughly 4 years, coinciding perfectly with university graduation. This was already an incredibly fast rate of cultivation. Normally, SR-ranked individuals could not cultivate so swiftly. She was almost on par with SSRs. Congratulations, Xiang Beifei said aloud. Thank you. And Xiyu replied calmly and politely. Last year, she lost to the then-freshman Xiang Beifei in her understanding of the beast-tide defense, which did not sit well with her. But soon after, Xiang Beifei's strength taught her that there were always greater heights to reach, giving her a lesson with his actions that forced her to acknowledge his talent. Still, every time she saw Xiang Beifei, she had a very strange feeling. Why was it that this boy, 1 year her junior, always seemed so inscrutable to her? By the way, Professor Guo, where's Elder Luo? Xiang Beifei inquired. He's been frequently absent these days, and nobody knows where to. Probably off doing something pointless again. I had actually planned to discuss something with him, Professor Guo said. shaking his head. Elder Luo isn't here? Xiang Beifei looked towards the grove, feeling puzzled. Since the winter vacation ended, he also hadn't seen Elder Luo for a long time, partly due to being busy with cultivation. But sometimes, when he remembered to look for Luo, Luo wouldn't be there. In the past few months, he had only seen Elder Luo 4 times. It seemed like the casual expert had suddenly become busy, and the last few times he saw Luo, he seemed to be speaking less. "You're here to practice spiritual power, right?" Professor Gua asked. "No, it's not that. By the way, about combining spiritual power with the Fange technique, has Elder Luo mentioned it to the professor?" Xiang Beifei asked. At this, Professor Gua frowned and said irritably, "He did mention it last time. He took me through the practice for a week, even reprimanded me arrogantly, bragging every time about my blockheadness, which irritated me to no end. Later, I realized you were the one who improved it. It was just a lucky accident that I stumbled upon it. I also have to thank the professor for teaching me the Fange technique," Xiang Beifei said. "It's not just luck. It's talent," Professor Gua stated seriously, then grumbled again. "That old Luo, it wasn't even his improvement, and he still put on airs in front of me. Stay tuned to FreeWeb Novel." Then he asked in a softer voice, "By the way, how long did it take Elder Luo to master this ability?" "He probably practiced for a day. He didn't grasp it right away at first. I later thought of a compromise," Xiang Beifei said. Xiang Beifei recalled the scene where Elder Luo struggled with countless dings and couldn't help but want to laugh. "That old rascal, he bragged to me that he learned it in no time at all, then lambasted me without mercy, buzzing my head for 2 days before he told me the real method of mastering it," Professor Gua said, clearly annoyed. Xiang Beifei responded with mixed laughter and tears. The laid-back elder liked to tease people, and even Professor Gua was no exception. Having a hard time with his disciple, Luo sought out the professor to regain some ground. Still, the fact that Elder Luo could joke around with Professor Gua meant his personality was unchanged. The recent incident concerning the unrestrained matter apparently hadn't affected him. "I have yet to thank you. You have no idea what happened to my system." Professor Gua seemed to be in a good mood. "If I can help the professor, that's great." Xiang Beifei couldn't see what Professor Gua's system interface was like, but he could roughly guess. If Elder Luo's system had added 450,000 leisure value, Professor Gua's wouldn't fall far behind. No, you still don't understand how much improvement this method has helped me. I've advanced an entire minor realm," Professor Gua exclaimed. "The help you've brought me isn't just the addition of system value, but also in the advancement of the anti-reversion cultivation technique. It's closely related to my cultivation level. I really don't know how to thank you." Xiang Beifei was somewhat surprised, but he still said, "Then congratulations to you, Professor. Please don't mention it, you've also helped me a lot." Although he didn't know what exactly Professor Gua's cultivation level was, he was still happy to have been able to help him advance. "Anyway, I've noted this favor. Elder Luo isn't here today. If you have any questions or need help with anything, I'll do my best to assist you," Professor Gua said. "There is something I do wish to consult with Professor Gua," Xiang Beifei said. "Professor, what exactly is the spirit soul?" "Spirit soul? Why are you suddenly asking about spirit souls?" Professor Gua found it strange as Xiang Beifei's cultivation was supposedly a long way from the god-refining phase. Xiang Beifei hesitated and said, "Actually, my system asked me to find the answer in advance." Professor Gua exclaimed in surprise, "This is your system task?" "Yes, it's a system task. To complete it, I need to learn a lot of knowledge in advance," Xiang Beifei said earnestly.
"No wonder."
Professor Gua nodded slightly and said, "You were able to score so highly on the Liangzhou University entrance exam and quickly master all the knowledge in my papers, handling matters with ease. Your awakener system must be related to learning, isn't it?" Many people were curious about Xiang Beifei's awakener system, and Professor Gua was clearly one of them. He didn't usually feel comfortable asking outright as it was private, but today he finally got the chance, and it was Xiang Beifei who brought it up himself. Xiang Beifei earnestly gave a thumbs up. I can't hide anything from the professor. Haha. Not at all. Professor Gua laughed, then said, Don't worry. Your system is absolutely confidential with me. Whatever you want to know about the spirit soul, just go ahead and ask. Xiang Beifei said, I want to know what exactly is the difference between the meridian opening phase and the God refining phase? If I were to encounter a master of the God refining phase, would I have any chance of defeating them? No chance. Professor Gua shook his head directly and said, I know you have great talent, but in reality, the meridian opening phase and the God refining phase are not even in the same league. Once in the God refining phase, one's entire strength undergoes a qualitative change. There's not the slightest chance, because the others have an additional spirit soul. You, in the meridian opening phase, have no chance of killing a master in the God refining phase. Xiang Beifei nodded thoughtfully. Then what exactly is the spirit soul? He asked. The spirit soul is a whole new realm. Professor Gua patiently explained to Xiang Beifei. In the meridian opening phase, one needs to forge energy meridians, which are used to strengthen one's physical constitution and make one's spiritual power more abundant, ensuring you don't feel powerless when using your abilities. Once the energy meridians are fully forged, one must refine these meridians into a spirit soul. Energy meridians are imbued within the body's own meridians, a very special substance. In a way, forging energy meridians is like constructing an additional skeleton within one's body. But in the end, this skeleton is just a skeleton. After being fully opened, it is still a kind of unconscious, lifeless object. And God refining is about turning that skeleton into a living thing. So God refining is the process of gradually animating the energy meridians in a very special way. It's like giving yourself a second life. If your body is destroyed, you can rely on the spirit soul to survive, Professor Gua concluded. So that's how it is. Xiang Beifei had roughly understood, and he then asked, It seems like the spirit soul doesn't have battle strength? The spirit soul in the God refining phase doesn't have battle strength, at least when you've just refined it, it cannot condense battle strength. To determine the strength of someone's spirit soul, one must look at its substantiality. If it is only a shadow-like spirit soul, then it belongs to the very weak ones. But if you touch the spirit soul and can feel its solidity, then that person's spirit soul does possess battle strength. You mean the more condensed the spirit soul, the stronger it is? Xiang Beifei asked. Right, that's the idea. Professor Gua nodded. From this perspective, Lu Shenghui's spirit soul was very weak, and the spirits of eternal sleep and Keishi were also shadow-like, not too impressive. Then, can a spirit soul be revived? Xiang Beifei asked again. That depends on the abilities of the system. Although it's like having an extra life, the spirit soul is not really a body after all. A martial artist with a fragile spirit soul will need the help of others. But generally, systems will have their ways. Professor Gua said. So, how do you refine meridians into a spirit soul? Xiang Beifei asked again. Once you've fully opened your meridians, the system will definitely help you. It will propose the most suitable path according to your body's condition. You don't have to worry about this for now. Elder Luo and I discussed it before. Different systems have different ways of refining the spirit soul, and I can't say if my method suits you. Professor Gua said. Xiang Beifei said, Professor, could you give me some guidance without revealing the secrets of your system? What kind of talk is that? Helping students become stronger is our responsibility as teachers. There's no such thing as secrets in this context. Since you need to do a system task, I'll certainly help you. Professor Gua gestured dismissively. Professor, regarding system secrets, it's still important to be cautious and not disclose everything. After all, if others learn about your system, it's akin to exposing your weaknesses, and it's easy to be targeted. Xiang Beifei knew that Professor Gua was a responsible teacher, but it was often such people who were easier to be exploited by those with ulterior motives. For instance, when dealing with those blind to reason, he always relied on exploiting the weaknesses of their systems, something he knew all too well. Haha. Don't worry, I know my limits. I wouldn't tell just anyone, but you've helped me a great deal, so this doesn't count as a secret. I can even tell you how Luo refined his spirit soul, which he had once shared with me and would undoubtedly share with you as well, Professor Guo said. And Shiyu looked at Xiang Beifei with rippling eyes. If it had been someone else, she would certainly have intervened to prevent Professor Guo from divulging such information, for fear of troublemakers like Wu Shixian. But since it was Xiang Beifei who asked, she didn't say much. However, she was also pondering over the issue with Xiang Beifei's system. There were too many systems of the scholarly type, various scholar systems, invincible scholar-god systems from S to SSR. A multitude could be listed, many of which essentially pursued the literary Dao. An awakener like Xiang Beifei, who was peerless in the martial Dao, was truly rare. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask more. I'm here to help you with the task. You can ask anything, and if I can help you become stronger, I'd be willing to sit here and answer your questions for 3 days and nights. Professor Guo was a person with a strong sense of responsibility. As long as he could help students become stronger and grow into talents that could resist desolate beasts, he would impart all his knowledge to them. Thank you, Professor. Then let me tell you how to refine meridians into a spirit soul. Professor Guo said. I'll leave then, and Shiyu said. You don't need to leave. You can listen to this as well, Professor Guo said. And Shiyu fell silent for a moment, then shook her head. No, I shouldn't know about these things. I'll wait outside. You child, we're all one of our own, what shouldn't you know? Professor Guo asked. But Shiyu didn't explain and turned to leave the grove. Xiang Beifei stared at Shiyu's retreating figure, faintly realizing something. Xiang Beifei had already gone back. He had acquired the knowledge he wanted. Professor Guo had taught him everything he knew about the soul, and Shiyu had been waiting outside the forest for them. This child has a bright future. His cultivation speed is obviously faster than yours, Shiyu, so you should grasp the opportunity, Professor Guo remarked wistfully. And Shiyu asked, What do you mean by that, Professor? Professor Guo revealed a meaningful smile. I saw you climbing the stairs that day. And Shiyu's expression turned stiff. Haha, I'm not completely oblivious to the outside world. I do occasionally go online. The People's Choice, such a boy belongs to something. Oh right, what they call online. A treasure boy. Everyone is treasure hunting, but you have the pavilion by the water's edge, and just now you didn't even chat with him a bit more. Professor Guo said with weight in his words. And Shiyu shook her head slightly. My climbing the stairs had no other meaning. I was just curious why he would make such a request. I understand, said Professor Guo, his mouth corner upturned with a smile. But with your competitive nature, you must have already met the selection criteria. And Shiyu remained silent and did not deny it. Professor Guo spoke patiently. You're also of age now. If you truly like him, be bold. I'll make the decision for you. He is Luo's disciple, and if you have that intention, I will have to thicken my face and go to Luo to whisper in his ear. Oh no! To start a tornado. Stir the waters. In Professor Guo's eyes, the two of them were extremely outstanding, a match of talent and beauty. Given his relationship with Luo Yunxian, he felt compelled to pursue the matter with Luo Yunxian. There's no need for the professor to do that, and Shiyu shook her head. Don't be shy, be bold. Professor, you're not aware of why the Alliance is so supportive of him? And Shiyu said. Professor Guo was taken aback. Why? The professor should pay more attention to the directions of Alliance policies when you have time, analyze their purposes, and be more cautious of the people in the Alliance. And Shiyu was somewhat helpless regarding the honest Professor Guo, who was solely focused on academia, not caring much for power. He preferred research, studying what abilities could be better used to resist the beast tides, how to kill the invading desolate beasts. He didn't understand the underhanded tricks, the power struggles, the cunning schemes, nor did he like to ponder the significance of the Alliance's actions. He preferred to spend his time teaching and researching defense against beast tides. Because of this, despite his considerable strength, he was still oppressed by the likes of Wu Shixian, who were less noble within the Alliance. The Alliance's support for Xiang Beifei is mainly to monitor Professor Luo closely. Xiang Beifei's talent is indeed high, which makes the Alliance very apprehensive, So the comprehensive selection is just a front. It's less the people's choice and more the people's surveillance. And Shiyu explained. People's surveillance on Luo? Professor Guo was quite shocked. He had been so engrossed in his research recently that he hadn't thought about this, only knowing that Xiang Beifei had suddenly become popular, without realizing it was the Alliance's deliberate doing. Not only Professor Luo but also you, Professor, since many people know about your close relationship with Professor Luo. If the Alliance fears Professor Luo, they will inevitably target you too. And Shiyu was a girl with a sharp mind. She saw through these matters very clearly, which is why she always harbored underlying concerns. During my internship at the Alliance, many have approached me to inquire about his matters, and I have tried my best to cover for him, but I cannot be sure that I won't slip up. Maybe I inadvertently revealed something without even realizing. And Shiyu furrowed her eyebrows. In the Alliance, there were many whose system rankings and strengths surpassed hers. Their system abilities were formidable. As an SR Awakener, her advantage in the Alliance wasn't that significant. Professor Guo said gravely, "They've gone too far. So, I came back today hoping you could give me some ways to protect myself, to ensure I'm not coaxed into talking or perhaps." And Shiyu paused here, pressing her lips tightly together, and said, "Professor, is there a way for me to forget any memories about his and Professor Luo's cultivation and life?" "You want to forget him?" Professor Guo was extremely surprised. And Shiyu looked in the direction where Xiang Beifei had left, silent for a long time as if making up her mind, then said, "I know too many everyday things about him and Professor Luo. I must forget these to avoid becoming a breakthrough point for the Alliance against them." Once she joined the Alliance, she realized how difficult it was for her. The Alliance's system-centric, flawed hierarchy was a place she disliked, even wanting to escape at one point. She would rather fight desolate beasts than stay in such a conniving place. But Xiang Beifei's words last year made her realize that to protect pure educators like Professor Guo, she needed to climb higher, to a very high position. Only with power could she protect those she respected most, improving the situation for guardians like Professor Guo who dedicated themselves to defense. Only then did Professor Guo realize why Shiyu had chosen to leave when he was teaching Xiang Beifei the method to refine his soul. And Shiyu was restraining herself from learning too much about Xiang Beifei to avoid causing trouble for him and Professor Luo. Thus, regarding how to refine the soul, even if she wanted to know, she couldn't afford to listen in. Professor Guo said, "You can keep it secret, just like a pioneer who can't disclose their mission." And Shiyu shook her head. "The Alliance has all sorts of awakeners, including those who excel at decryption. I don't possess your strong defenses, nor do I have Professor Luo's indestructible spiritual power, making it hard to resist them." Professor Guo's gaze wavered uncertainly. He had not considered the underlying reasons behind the whole matter until now, when he realized the severity of the situation. After a long time, he sighed and asked, "Are you really willing to do this for him? Do you truly have no feelings for him in that regard?" And Shiyu withdrew her gaze, a strange light in her eyes, perhaps melancholy, perhaps loss. She didn't know why she felt this way, since she and he were just classmates. She was a teaching assistant. He was the class representative. Their usual interactions were limited to discussing how to lead their classmates in dealing with beast tides. Yet, when she made this decision, her heart felt empty.
"No,"
she said softly, biting her lip. Xiang Beifei returned to his cultivation spot and began refining his soul. He needed to quickly enhance his cultivation level. Only with strength could he protect those around him and do what he wanted to do. To refine the spiritual veins into the soul, you need to strip out the spiritual veins. Xiang Beifei recalled Professor Guo's words. According to Professor Guo, stripping out the spiritual veins and refining them into the soul wasn't too complex a process, but it was very troublesome. Initially, Professor Guo achieved it with the help of the system, using a God-gathering talisman and spending a hefty sum of system points, step by step with the system's aid. For high-level system awakeners, chi controlling and meridian opening stages are not difficult, but the step of refining the soul, everyone spends a long time on it. Because refining the soul is very difficult. This process is divided into two steps. The first step is to separate the spiritual veins. The second step is to refine the spiritual veins into the soul. Professor Gua, a highly gifted esser, took over a year to complete these two steps. Elder Luo was relatively more adept. It took him 8 months to complete these two steps. The process is lengthy, and even with the system's help, God refining is not achieved overnight. It means that his high school principal, S-level Li Nanqing, who obtained a God refining pill last July, might not have reached the God refining stage yet. He might only be on the second step. Once in the God refining stage, cultivation improvements become much slower, and system missions more challenging. Like Yu Qixin and Yi Changfeng, who have had awakening systems for at least 20 years and are still only in the mid to late stages of God refining. No wonder so many people get stuck in the late meridian opening stage. Xiang Beifei couldn't help but exclaim. Refining the soul represents a qualitative change. It's a completely different realm from the meridian opening stage. Both Professor Gua and Elder Luo refined their souls relying on their cultivation techniques. Elder Luo used his extreme spiritual power that could block UR detection to refine spiritual power, while Professor Gua used a powerful counter-technique. Fortunately, Professor Gua explained this process in great detail. Xiang Beifei had also learned both men's techniques, and even combined their techniques which could exert more powerful effects. Learn by analogy allowed him to quickly find a method to refine his soul that suited him, but he did not rely on spiritual power and counter-technique, but learned by analogy to his own Chaos Yin-Yang formula. The Chaos Yin-Yang formula is highly receptive to other systems' techniques, capable of simulating the status of spiritual power and counter-technique, then transforming into his own version. It does not reject any technique. Thus Xiang Beifei could practice various system techniques. Elder Luo and Professor Gua's techniques were just what Xiang Beifei had blended together, so he began to cultivate following their ways of soul refining. The first step is to separate the soul. Chaotic yin and yang circulated throughout his body. The spiritual power contained within the spiritual veins was very abundant and flowed smoothly. Soon he entered a very peculiar state. To refine the soul, one must first perceive the spiritual veins throughout the body and strip the perception of the spiritual veins alone, maintaining a very clear state in mind. The process was very cumbersome because a person's spiritual veins, said to stretch for 108,000 miles, was not an exaggeration. Intertwined closely with the blood vessels, they formed the shape of the human body, and his task was to fully display this state. When he circulated spiritual power in his spiritual veins, his mind clearly perceived the full view of his spiritual veins. Next, he needed to slowly strip away the perception of the spiritual veins, allowing the spiritual veins to exist independently of the body, as if drawing silk from a cocoon. This was a meticulous task. According to Professor Gua, the first step took him a full 2 months. Xiang Beifei was prepared for a prolonged battle. He figured it would also take him a long time, at least 10 to 15 days. Thus, he seriously circulated the Chaos Yin-Yang formula, drawing the silk from the cocoon following Professor Gua's guidance. The Chaos Yin-Yang formula slowly circulated through all the meridians in his body, and then, an odd fluctuation spread throughout Xiang Beifei's entire body. What happened to the prolonged battle? Xiang Beifei was stunned. In his mind, he distinctly felt his body's meridians peeling off smoothly under the flow of the Chaos Yin-Yang formula. Very smooth. It was as if, with just a slurp, they separated on their own. This made Xiang Beifei become solemn. Too smooth. It certainly didn't seem like something that would take 2 months to achieve. He had only used half an hour. Could Professor Gua have been mistaken? No, I must confirm this. The matter of refining his soul was something he was exploring on his own. Everyone else was slow, but his progress was alarmingly fast, which made him nervous. Professor Gua had mentioned that if there was the slightest carelessness during the separation of the meridians, failing to separate them properly could damage the meridians. That would be equivalent to cultivation regression, requiring the reopening of the damaged meridians. He couldn't be careless. He carefully examined the separated meridians. They floated outside the blood vessels, and it seemed as if his body and bones no longer existed, leaving only a skeleton composed of pale white meridians. His ultimate goal was to transform these pathways into a soul, which meant providing these meridians with a bodily framework. If one had to describe it, it would be like coating the meridians with a layer of flesh conjured by spiritual power to form the soul. This framework is usually built using one's own cultivation technique. Elder Luo used spiritual power to condense it, while Professor Guo used his contrary technique. Similarly, he needed to use his own Chaos Yin-Yang formula. Xiang Beifei carefully compared notes with his notebook. Professor Guo was very responsible. To help him, he had meticulously recorded every point, every step clearly, almost as if he had personally helped Xiang Beifei separate them himself. About 10 minutes later, Xiang Beifei had finished checking all the meridians in his body. There's nothing wrong. Xiang Beifei compared the key points in the notebook and again checked his own state of the meridians. The meridians had separated from the bodily blood vessels and could change shape at any time, without any discrepancy. Perhaps Professor Guo was a bit too exaggerated. This isn't that difficult. Xiang Beifei didn't think further. Having separated the meridians, he moved on to the next step, to refine the meridians into a soul. The second step was the hardest. Professor Guo took 9 months on this step. This is the real endurance battle. Xiang Beifei once again prepared himself. Perhaps for the next few months he would be cultivating here. But soon, he realized he might be mistaken again. Because about a week after he ran the chaotic Yin-Yang Qi formula, a black aura started rising around those white meridians. This seemed different from what Professor Guo had described. Where did it go wrong? He was practicing the Chaos Yin-Yang formula, but now he couldn't be sure what this technique actually implied. However, he quickly remembered Xiaohe, who was entirely white. The Chaos Yin-Yang formula had come from Xiaohe, and Xiaohe could not only become white but also black. Could there be a connection? He ran the formula again, and at that moment the black aura, lingering outside the white meridians, began to condense automatically. That black aura swiftly formed into a faint figure, as if it had created a black skeleton supporting the white meridians. This seemed to be a soul? It seems not too difficult. Xiang Beifei stroked his chin. These 2 steps had taken Professor Guo over a year, Elder Luo 8 months, yet he had only taken a week. Was that too fast? Every May is a very special day, at least for the leaders of Liangzhou University, who will be busy for the next 2 or 3 months. It's the month of the annual awakening system. During this period, professors and teachers from elite universities pay attention to and contact principals from every high school, greeting them and asking for their assistance in scouting for new student sources. As soon as a school identifies a super genius awakener, they waste no time in sending delegates to negotiate school selection. Students with high-tier system ranks are highly sought after by everyone. This matter is of the utmost seriousness, concerning the reputation of our school. Everyone must mobilize your connections to search for SR and SSR students, and even URs. We absolutely can't let other schools get there first. As the president of Liangzhou University, Chao Pei was conducting a staff mobilization meeting in the Liangzhou University auditorium. Jiuzhou is vast, with thousands of high schools at least, and no one knows which of them will awaken a UR or SSR this year. Which is why deploying personnel in advance is a task that every elite university needs to prepare for. The teachers and professors of Liangzhou University are all quite capable, and they have a good reputation, but not every high school principal will give them face, because the other 8 elite universities are also recruiting. This is a silent contest among elite universities. Last year was unlucky for Liangzhou University, as they didn't recruit any SSR freshmen. Although the events at the elite competition were bizarre, where an N-level swept all SSRs, this after all was an unlikely event. Improbable events cannot dictate the admissions rules of Liangzhou University. After Chao Pei's impassioned speech, he then said, "If anyone has any suggestions about this year's admission situation, you can present them now." Yi Changfeng spoke up, "Due to Xiang Beifei, I estimate this year we will have many N-level awakeners applying to our university. Right now, Xiang Beifei's influence is significant, and many are filled with longing for Liangzhou University because of him, subtly elevating the status of our university by a notch. Has anyone considered seizing this opportunity to slightly improve the admissions system? An N-level who could beat SSR's Xiang Beifei had practically become the foremost among the 9 elite universities, which was an acknowledged fact. However, no sooner had Yi Changfeng finished speaking than someone immediately opposed him. Allowing N-level students into our elite university? What a joke! How do N-level students deserve to study at our elite university? Do we also want to become the laughingstock of other universities? Wei Tong was the first to object. He was extremely displeased with the existence of Xiang Beifei. Because of this N-level student, his methodical system could not perform the archival arrangement task well. If a few more N-levels were recruited, wouldn't it cause him trouble? It was an N-level student who got us the overall first place in the elite freshman competition this year, Yi Changfeng stated. Wei Tong retorted, "Are you sure that N-level student has brought honor to our university? Initially, other universities were suspicious of us, and there are still those who doubt that our university orchestrated that event for the sake of honor. The damage to our reputation this caused far outweighs the honor he brought us. Who is suspicious? The Alliance or Qingzhou University? How can you not refute such absurd accusations with confidence? As the dean of the martial arts college, you should at least know how to defend your own students, shouldn't you?" Yi Changfeng stared at this literary Dao SSR. After the freshman competition incident, the Alliance was full of suspicions about Xiang Beifei, and Wei Tong, like a dead man, never spoke up for him. Logically, every school suffered serious losses, but only Xiang Beifei brought his team back safe and sound. He should have been commended by the school. But Wei Tong, as if blind, seemed not to see these things. After returning to school, he did not even mention them. "I am the dean. Of course, I act with measure. Each step must be carefully considered. Solving problems outside isn't about fists, but brains," Wei Tong said angrily. "Someone with a clear head should know how to protect their students out in the world," Yi Changfeng remarked. The faculty and staff in attendance began to whisper among themselves. In fact, many were dissatisfied with Wei Tong serving as the dean of the martial arts college, but since he was sent by the Alliance and was an SSR himself, they held back their displeasure. The atmosphere of the meeting became somewhat stiff due to the disagreement between Wei Tong and Yi Changfeng. At this moment, a discordant voice came from the corner. "Mr. Yi, this is where you are wrong. Dean Wei is impartial. He helped the investigation by the Alliance with an attitude of fairness and pursuit of truth. His approach should be commended." Yi Changfeng turned his head and looked towards the corner of the auditorium. A middle-aged man dressed in a white suit sat there, spotlessly clean, neat as a pin, like a refined gentleman, mild and scholarly. Even sitting in an inconspicuous corner, he still could not hide the regal demeanor of someone extraordinary in every movement. The others suddenly also noticed the man's presence and were slightly startled. This person was not a faculty member of Liangzhou University, but everyone knew who he was. The commander of the Alliance Beast Tide Defense Department, a UR-level awakener, He Kaiwei.
Ye Changfeng's Brahms Furoed.
He didn't even know when He Kaiwei arrived. He wasn't there before the meeting started. Chao Pei had also just noticed He Kaiwei, but he seemed unsurprised and said with a smile, "Commander He has arrived, and everyone should recognize Commander He, an alumnus of Liangzhou University. Today we are fortunate to have Commander He attend our Liangzhou University faculty meeting. Let's give him a warm welcome." A round of enthusiastic applause echoed throughout the meeting room. The teachers here were naturally aware of He Kaiwei's identity and status. The reason elite schools scramble to snatch high-ranking talents from high schools across Zheozhou every year is to maintain their voice in the Alliance. As an UR-level awakener, He Kaiwei had emerged from Liangzhou University. Among the alumni of Liangzhou University, he is one with extraordinary achievements, the commander of the entire Zheozhou Beast Tide Defense Department. The person who held this position before him was Luo Yunxian. Such an important position being consecutively held by two individuals from Liangzhou University demonstrates the confidence Liangzhou University has within the Alliance. Yi Changfeng did not clap. He did not welcome this man. Despite being a product of Liangzhou University, He Kaiwei did not truly stand with Liangzhou University. Within the alliance, he belonged to the vanguard of the idol faction, siding with other UR-level elites from elite schools to ostracize Elder Luo, and even failing to speak up for Liangzhou University on some key decisions. He claimed to be helping justice, not relatives. But in actuality, he was helping his own interests, not relatives. Before the meeting, Chao Pei and other school leaders did not notify Elder Luo and did not even consider him as a staff member to be included in the meeting. They did not invite Elder Luo, but they did invite someone like He Kaiwei. That was because in Chao Pei's eyes, UR-level He Kaiwei was clearly more worth ingratiating with than Luo Yunxian, who had retired and no longer had much say. Previously, they could never invite him, but now that he had volunteered to come, Chao Pei could not be happier. It is a fortunate thing that Commander He could take the time out of his busy schedule to guide our work. Now, please allow Commander He to say a few words, Chao Pei said with a beaming smile. Another round of applause broke out in the auditorium. Thank you, Principal Chao. Being able to return to Liangzhou University is a very nice thing, He Kaiwei said. He Kaiwei slowly walked up from the corner, and Chao Pei made way for the main speaker's position, clearing the floor for He Kaiwei. Glancing over the entire meeting room, he revealed an approachable smile. Coming back to Liangzhou University once again is indeed quite moving for me. After all, this is my alma mater. I hope it can develop even better in the future. And if there are any issues, I also hope to contribute to building Liangzhou University. He looked towards Yi Changfeng and then said, "Let us continue with the question Mr. Yi just raised. Mr. Yi, are you hoping for elite universities to recruit N-level students?" "That's correct," Yi Changfeng replied with neither servility nor arrogance. "Then how do you plan to deal with these N-level students?" He Kaiwei asked. Yi Changfeng responded, "I suggest taking advantage of the influence brought by Xiang Beifei to set up a special improvement class, specifically recruiting high-scoring N-level students and arranging courses according to their abilities." He Kaiwei nodded slightly and said, "Mr. Ye's intention is good, but you've forgotten one thing. The number of N-level students who can achieve success is ultimately sparse. If we indiscriminately let them into our school, the quality of our student body will become uneven, and N-level students are also likely to face exclusion from others. However, we should consider another aspect. These N-level students lack any advantage from the system's ranking, but scoring over 650 points entirely through their own intellect proves they are clever and have a solid foundation. They may not have achieved much in martial Dao, but with their brains, they certainly have a place in the literary Dao." Yi Changfeng paused before continuing. "Offering such students a chance to study at elite universities is not a bad idea. On one hand, it can showcase Liangzhou University's magnanimity, and on the other hand, it can enhance the influence of Liangzhou University." Wei Tong spoke dismissively from below. "N-level students, even if they graduate from an elite university, won't achieve much in the future. What's the use of learning? How many low-ranking awakeners ever make something of themselves? Education should be fair, not biased by the advantage of the system's ranking to deny these high-scoring N-level students the chance to even receive the finest education by keeping them out of elite universities with one single standard. Every day we face various threats from desolate beasts in the outer domains. If the desolate beasts were to attack on a large scale again, those level N students might not be able to join the fight, but they would at least understand how to protect those around them as well as handle logistics. That is the purpose of teaching and nurturing students at elite schools, to cultivate people who can protect civilians at critical moments." Yi Changfeng still held fast to his view. He Kaiwei smiled slightly and said unhurriedly, "Mr. He seems to have forgotten something. Cultivating level N students is what ordinary universities are supposed to do, not something for elite institutions to consider. This is the difference between ordinary and elite universities. If we also start enrolling level N students on a large scale, what's the point of having elite universities? Mr. Yi, your suggestion needs further consideration, and I don't agree with its feasibility." Yi Changfeng fell silent for a moment and didn't speak again. The system determined fate. A person's social status was destined at the moment of their awakening. No matter how smart they were, if they awakened a level N system, it was basically hopeless. He wanted to change the situation, but still felt powerless. Moreover, Qiao Pei had already planned to use He Kaiwei to raise Liangzhou University's status within the alliance, creating further complications. Where has Elder Luo gone, with no news for so long? Yi Changfeng let out a small sigh inside. If Elder Luo were still at the university, how could someone like He Kaiwei even have a say? But recently, Elder Luo was hardly ever at the university, and He Kaiwei had been keeping an eye on him. He was making these moves because he had noticed Elder Luo's absence. That being said, why haven't we seen Xiang Beifei lately? He hasn't attended classes, nor has he shown his face around the university. It's been 2 months since anyone last saw him, Qiao Pei inquired. He is cultivating, Yi Changfeng replied. Not showing up at all. Not a trace of the discipline a student should have. That's unacceptable. He hasn't even requested leave from me, Wei Tong huffed. The essence of martial Tao is cultivation, Yi Changfeng responded. He Kaiwei looked at Yi Changfeng with a meaningful expression, saying, a student should still behave like a student. I hope he's not using cultivation as an excuse to skip classes. As far as I'm aware, although he has reached the proficiency required to graduate, he is still a student if he hasn't completely passed all the graduation course assessments. Dean Wei's words make sense. Since Xiang Beifei hasn't requested leave, his current actions are equivalent to skipping classes. If he doesn't follow the school's regulations, I don't think Dean Wei would allow him to graduate. If he isn't able to graduate in the end, that would be quite the joke once it gets out. Mr. Yi, I hope you'll talk to him. Yi Changfeng's expression darkened. With Xiang Beifei's abilities, passing the graduation assessment would be a piece of cake. But the problem was that He Kaiwei was obviously intending to interfere with the affairs of Liangzhou University. Wei Tong stood with He Kaiwei, and whether Xiang Beifei could graduate was up to He Kaiwei's decision. He Kaiwei now wanted to suppress Xiang Beifei, making him show up daily, monitoring him, and disrupting his cultivation rhythm. And even if he did show up, He Kaiwei wasn't likely to let him graduate easily. Xiang Beifei's reputation was soaring high. If such a talent couldn't graduate, he would likely face much criticism. Whether or not to graduate was actually irrelevant to Xiang Beifei. Even if he dropped out, it wouldn't make much difference. But the problem was, many people would start questioning Liangzhou University, and at that time, He Kaiwei could direct all the blame towards Elder Luo. As a venerable elder of Liangzhou University, it would be a huge joke if a student mentored by Elder Luo couldn't meet the graduation requirements of Liangzhou University. Elder Luo's reputation in the public eye would likely plummet. With just a little push from He Kaiwei using his own tactics, he could completely set Elder Luo against all level N awakeners. The supporters of Xiang Beifei were all brought up by the Alliance, and it wouldn't be hard for the Alliance to guide them. With just a slight implication that Xiang Beifei couldn't graduate because of Elder Luo, all level N awakeners might join together in an offensive against Elder Luo. This was He Kaiwei's real aim. This is getting troublesome. Yi Changfeng began to feel a growing anxiety. For He Kaiwei's sake, Qiao Pei specifically convened a school-wide assembly, gathering all martial arts students together, allowing He Kaiwei to deliver a speech. This left many students extremely excited. Awakener He Kaiwei, the commander of the Alliance Beast Tide Defense Department, was also their former senior at Liangzhou University. Each aspect of his identity was highly respected by countless students. Each new cohort of SR students could already command much attention, let alone witnessing an UR Awakener today, truly a rare and fortunate occurrence. Many students looked up to He Kaiwei with reverence, listening to his guidance and treating him as if he were a god. Our students at Liangzhou University, each and every one of you are elites. In my eyes, each of you is a pillar of the Alliance's future. Liangzhou University's achievements today are the result of everyone's joint efforts. As the commander of the Alliance Beast Tide Defense Department and a former student of Liangzhou University, I am extremely proud. I admire every Liangzhou University student, and if you aspire to work for the Alliance in the future, I will do my utmost to help you all. I also hope everyone strives for excellence, as Liangzhou University will not give up on any student. He Kaiwei's speech was deeply moving. His own scholarly demeanor, coupled with the status of an UR individual, made his influence extremely powerful. A simple speech from him stirred the emotions of all students, and the applause on the field lasted for a full 10 minutes. I didn't expect Commander He to be so approachable. He doesn't put on any airs at all. Indeed, he's encouraging us as a senior. Being treated like younger siblings by an UR big shot is truly lucky. Many students couldn't stop praising He Kaiwei, and even began to look forward to the chance of working under him after graduating and joining the Alliance. His friendly attitude towards juniors had harvested a wave of goodwill. However, these students probably never imagined that this refined senior before their eyes had secretly dispatched 3 god-refining stage masters to assassinate his so-called junior, Xiang Beifei. He Kaiwei had a great reputation at Liangzhou University. Quiet changes were taking place at the Martial Arts College of Liangzhou University. With the covert support of He Kaiwei, Wei Tong, the dean of the Martial Arts College, had gained enough power to start a series of reforms at the Martial Arts College of Liangzhou University. Wei Tong, who had awakened the SSR grade methodical system, now held significant power in the school with the support of the Alliance's He Kaiwei. He had indeed implemented a uniform dress code for all university students. Male students had to wear crew cuts, female students were required to tie up their hair, all students had to get up at 6 a.m., and leave the dormitory before 6:30 a.m. Even if they had no classes in the morning or afternoon, they were not allowed to return to their dorms. Students returning from training in the outer desolate wilderness had to take a shower in the public bathhouse before entering the campus. Garments ragged and stained with desolate beast blood were not allowed on campus. Loud noises were forbidden in school. The volume was not allowed to exceed 80 decibels. Lights had to be out and the internet shut off by 11 at night. No shoulder hugging was allowed on campus. Displaying the remains of desolate beasts was prohibited, as was boasting about how one had slain a desolate beast. On-campus fighting using martial practicing abilities for trivial disputes was forbidden because it would disturb the neatly arranged plants and scatter dust everywhere. Wei Tong had set up a point system for students' daily behavior, starting at 100 for each person. Those who didn't follow the rules would have points deducted, and those who didn't reach 60 by the end of the term were not allowed to take exams in various subjects. Of course, where there were penalties, there were also rewards. Wei Tong encouraged students to report on each other for infractions. If the report was true, for every few points deducted from the person being reported, the reporter would have the same number of points added. He even established a patrol team consisting of students to monitor the campus, directly deducting points for improper behavior. Wei Tong also made it clear that the higher one's daily behavior points, the greater the likelihood of his recommendation to the Alliance. Now, every student of the Martial Arts College was feeling quite uneasy. All of them usually focused on their own training or internships in the outer desolate wilderness or simulation rooms, therefore often ending up dirty and disheveled. But Wei Tong, a literary Taoist who didn't understand martial cultivation, had set a bunch of messy rules that greatly troubled them. Due to the importance of daily behavior points, they had to squeeze out time from their training sessions to meet Wei Tong's requirements. Class 1 to 3 students, following your requirements, have worn the unified school uniform, orderliness value plus 50. All male students in Class 1 to 4 have crew cuts, orderliness value plus 60. The more orderly the student's behavior, the more points were added to Wei Tong's methodical system. A fine martial arts college, which should have been cultivating martial practicing warriors to resist desolate beasts, had become Wei Tong's private backyard for completing system tasks. All martial arts students were aggrieved and annoyed, but for the sake of their futures, they dared not defy Dean Wei Tong. Of course, some students saw this as an opportunity. To obtain the chance to join the Alliance, many began to secretly report on others to increase their own points. The culture of reporting within the campus grew stronger and the atmosphere at Liangzhou University had become quite strange. Wei Tong was an SSR literary Taoist who couldn't fight and didn't even understand the classification of desolate beasts. In any case, even if a beast tide erupted, it was not his turn to fight on the battlefield. Such a literary Taoist only needed to safely hide at home. Moreover, the beast tide hasn't erupted for a very long time now, and the frontline defenses these past few years have been very solid, with desolate beasts unable to break through. He didn't care at all whether the students trained like this could withstand the beast tide. He only knew that in just one short week, he had reaped as much as 3 million orderliness values. 3 million, no less. Usually, he'd have to complete system tasks for half a year or even a year to earn that amount. Yet, all he had to do was enact a few regulations, and he reached it in 1 week. This is the martial arts college I wanted to see. Wei Tong was very satisfied with the current situation. When he had first arrived, under the imposing aura of Luo Yunxian, he had felt restrained in his actions. Now that Luo Yunxian had disappeared for some unknown reason and had He Caiwei's support, his confidence was substantially bolstered. Wei Tong not only established a behavioral standard score for students but also created a teaching score for teachers. He demanded that teachers must fix the students' seating during class, with each student being seated according to the system's rank. Students with high-level systems would sit in one row, and those with low-level systems would sit in another, with each row also ordered by height, with shorter ones in the front and taller ones in the back, and male and female students separated. He would regularly inspect classrooms, and if any teacher did not teach to his standards, he would immediately deduct teaching points, which were tied to evaluations and honors. The entire martial arts college of Liangzhou University had been forced to adapt to Wei Tong's methodical system and had started to transform into formalized teaching. However, some teachers had no intention of making any corrections. Yi Changfeng, why is your classroom so disorderly? How many times have I told you to make corrections? When Wei Tong inspected Yi Changfeng's classroom, he found it rowdy with students standing around loudly discussing something, not following his instructions for the class, which infuriated him. Yi Changfeng's classroom is too disordered. Please host bring order and sort it out. His system prompted him. Yi Changfeng looked at Wei Tong indifferently, adjusted his glasses, and said, I'm conducting a simulation class on the extraterritorial desolate territory. A practical course, so it's impossible to be neat and tidy. Wei Tong snorted coldly and was not convinced, as such a classroom simply could not add to his system value, especially since the students had already been divided into groups, but not all groups had the same number of members. Some groups had 5, some 6, and some even had 10. Yi Changfeng's classroom has unbalanced group numbers. Please host bring order and sort it out. Why have you divided the groups like this? Isn't it unfair to other groups with fewer members if group numbers aren't balanced? Is this your standard of teaching? Wei Tong reprimanded. The groups in my class are divided based on pioneers' teams, with the number of each group determined by the diverse abilities of the students. As the dean of the martial arts college, I hope you'll study more about what the cultivation philosophy of martial artists is supposed to be, Yi Changfeng plainly stated. Nonsense. Pioneer teams typically consist of groups of 5. Do you think I'm unaware of that? Do I need you to teach me how to do my job? Wei Tong grew even more irritated. Not all teams in actual operations are composed of 5 people. If you truly researched what pioneering means, you wouldn't make such a statement. Teaching should consider the matching of students' abilities, not just forcibly aim for equal numbers. The desolate beasts won't explain the concept of fairness to you. They only care if you can inflict a kill, Yi Changfeng argued. 5 people per group is only because in the Alliance of Pioneers, there is no shortage of individuals with various system types, and one can readily form a well-rounded team. But that's not feasible in the classroom because the students' spiritual power capabilities are varied, and there is a limited number of students. For instance, the number of awakeners with mobility or defensive capabilities may not be exactly enough for even distribution. All students must participate in the simulation training, so the excess students must inevitably be compromised into other groups to compensate for any shortcomings, hence the situation where some groups might have 6 or even 10 members. But Wei Tong did not grasp this at all. He only knew that Yi Changfeng's classroom didn't follow his rules. Uneven numbers were in contradiction to his methodical system. Don't give me excuses. I demand that you strictly divide the numbers in your class as per my requirements. Every time your class is a complete mess, with no semblance of order in your teaching, what can the students learn? Wei Tong barked angrily. Yi Changfeng remained unmoved. How I teach my class is my business. Please do not interfere. Yi Changfeng, don't provoke my patience. I am the Dean of Martial Artists here, and what I say goes. Do you still want to apply for the associate professor position this year? Can someone with your teaching method become an associate professor? Wei Tong said, his tone full of threat. Whether he could become an associate professor in the end still required the signature of Wei Tong, the dean. Yi Changfeng glanced at Wei Tong, then directly ignored him and said to the students, "Let's get moving. In this class, we'll be training in volcanic terrain on how to deal with the black meteor fox. Every group needs to be vigilant and minimize the losses." With a wave of his hand, he took all the students into the simulation illusion, leaving Wei Tong standing alone at the classroom door, gritting his teeth with hatred at the empty room. Protecting the truant Xiang Beifei, not reporting Xiang Beifei's situation, acting on your own, not following my rules. I'll make you understand that opposing me brings no good. Wei Tong took out a pen and scribbled down a note on paper, deducting points from Yi Changfeng right away. He then went to inspect Yu Qishen's classroom, but Yu Qishen was even more direct. His awakening was the purgatory system, laying down a layer of purgatory domain in the classroom, its icy breath and murderous intent so strong that it sent shivers down one's spine from a distance. Yu Qishen was already a late-stage god-refining martial artist at the same level as Wei Tong, but his strength was many times more powerful than that of Wei Tong, a literary Taoist with a mere 250 combat power. Wei Tong tried several times to approach Yu Qishen's classroom but was deterred by the extremely cold zone. In the end, Wei Tong couldn't even enter Yu Qishen's classroom. Yu Qishen's classroom atmosphere clashes with others, disrupting the orderly atmosphere of the teaching building. Please rectify this promptly. Host. Yu Qishen, according to Regulation 9.4.3 of the Martial Arts College of Liangzhou University, your classroom atmosphere is too gloomy, seriously disrupting the teaching order, and you're not allowing me to enter. You have 1 day to rectify this. Wei Tong waited until after class to specifically intercept Yu Qishen. Oh! Yu Qishen responded emotionlessly. However, in the afternoon's class, he sealed the classroom off again. Wei Tong was absolutely furious. Of course, for Yu Qishen students, such a teaching method was undoubtedly very painful because Yu Qishen's training often left students peeling off a layer of skin. But they had grown accustomed to struggling in purgatory, so they didn't mind. Many teachers were also very resentful towards Wei Tong, so they complained to Principal Chao Pei, hoping he would stop Wei Tong from interfering with their teaching. However, Principal Chao Pei was now keen on gaining the alliance's support for Liangzhou University and planned to curry favor with He Kaiwei. Since Wei Tong was appointed by He Kaiwei, no matter what Wei Tong did, Chao Pei turned a blind eye. Most teachers were just seeking employment here. With Wei Tong now holding immense power, if one did not comply with his requirements, various bonuses would be deducted, so they had no choice but to swallow their grievances. Of course, many straightforward professors didn't take Wei Tong's nonsense. For example, when Wei Tong inspected Professor Guo's class and saw that Professor Guo had taken the students to the simulation room to prepare for Desolate Beast defense in the plains terrain. There, as they set up defense lines, they formed teams to lay traps, and discussions were buzzing all over the plains. Guo Zhenghong's classroom is too disorderly. Please sort it out methodically. Host. Wei Tong's brows were almost knotted into a tattered rag as he strode over to Professor Guo and barked, "Professor Guo, I sent you the classroom orderliness value table to your email the day before yesterday, and yet your class is still so. Get lost." Professor Guo shouted without hesitation. The sound was thunderous, like a muffled clap of thunder, stupefying Wei Tong, who staggered and fell onto a poison gas trap just laid by the students. A purple fog enveloped him immediately, and an appalling stench nearly knocked him out cold. Though Wei Tong also had a late-stage god-refining cultivation, Professor Guo was of a higher level. A mere shout could stupefy him like a muggle, leaving him unable to summon his spiritual power. Being a literary Taoist, he had no clue about the nature of the trap nor how to defend against it. Ugh! Wei Tong had just vomited a full stomach of water, bringing up his last night's meal. Fortunately, his body's resilience was strong. The taste of salt was the only thing he had to deal with, without damaging his essence, but it still rattled him. He vomited for a full 10 minutes before he finally stopped. When he realized he was surrounded by a group of pointing and whispering classmates, Wei Tong was immediately furious. "Professor Guo, you dare to poison me," Wei Tong said, his lips quivering. This poison gas bomb was only meant to defend against Dan Shrimps of the Middle Chi controlling stage. How can you, as the dean of the martial arts college, not be able to withstand even this? Professor Guo said impatiently. The thing he hated most was someone disrupting his class. Wei Tong grew even more ashamed and angry. When did he ever have time to care about such trifles? In his view, such juvenile traps were only something that simple-minded martial artists would study. Him, a lofty SSR, found his valuable time better spent ensuring the bookshelves in the library were tidy and the plants in the college gardens weren't growing crooked. That was his real job. How could he possibly waste time on student battle traps? Professor Guo, don't change the subject. Your classroom order is a mess. Not following the classroom order regulations issued by Martial Arts College of Liangzhou University. According to the classroom order chart, Rule Number 3, Clause 54, Item 19, every teacher's classroom order must ensure students carry out their studies in an orderly fashion, the number of students. But before Wei Tong could finish speaking, Professor Guo interrupted him. This is practical combat teaching, not an audition. Don't bring your meaningless nonsense into my classroom. When a beast tide hits, do you think martial artists will waste time making all their traps nice and uniform for your appreciation? To be honest, someone like you, a literary Dao adherent meddling in the training of martial artists, is a scourge to Jojo. With desolate beasts lurking outside, you think of nothing but putting on a show of formality. Putting the cart before the horse and senselessly interfering will sooner or later bring disaster to the students of Liangzhou University. Professor Guo was known for his forthrightness, saying what he thought, and he had long been dissatisfied with people like Wei Tong. If all the deans of martial arts schools in elite universities were like Wei Tong, then Zhuzhou might well be doomed. Many students greatly admired Professor Guo. They were very resistant to the various regulations promulgated by Wei Tong. But with Wei Tong being an SSR of noble status, students, no matter how resentful, didn't dare to question the decisions. However, Professor Guo had openly voiced everyone's thoughts, and seeing an SSR like Wei Tong being verbally thrashed by an SR professor to the point of blushing made them secretly respect Professor Guo. Indeed, you don't mess with the old professors. Guo Zhenghong, by questioning my decisions, you're questioning the decisions of the Alliance. I will report your words to the Alliance today, and I hope you'll continue to be so confident in the future. Wei Tong suppressed the anger in his heart. He dared not confront Professor Guo directly, so he left in a huff. A month later, the assessment of teachers by Wei Tong had come out. Of the more than 1,000 teachers at Liangzhou University, 696 were from the Martial Arts College, all under Wei Tong's management. Of these teachers, 431 failed the classroom evaluation. 410 were given a first warning and a deadline for improvement, while 21 were severely warned. Among them, Yi Chongfeng was retained for observation. Yu Qixin lost his associate professor title, and Professor Guo was directly demoted from full professor to ordinary lecturer. All three were also suspended from teaching for a month to reflect. For university professors, ranking such as a professorship can grant them higher authority both in the university and the Alliance, making it easier for them to carry out teaching activities. Professor Guo had been teaching his whole life and had reached retirement age. Now rehired to teach, he had never expected to be targeted by Wei Tong in such a petty way, having his professorship title stripped. This was the first time many had seen such a thing happen, and many felt it was unfair to Professor Guo. In the eyes of all students, although Professor Guo was strict, he was the most responsible professor, having guided nearly every student. To see him suppressed by Wei Tong like this angered many students. But no matter how unfair they felt, there was nothing they could do about it. As an SSR, Wei Tong's word was nearly absolute within the college. No one dared to contradict him. Yi Chongfeng's classes were suspended, and Wei Tong demanded he properly rectify his classroom order according to the requirements and pass Wei Tong's auditing assessment before he could resume teaching. But adhering to Wei Tong's methods meant Yi Changfeng had to split every pioneer team into groups of 5, which was practically impossible. The student system types varied, and it was not possible to form the right number of groups without causing a severe imbalance in strength, which would greatly hinder his teaching. Li Zimu, Long Guocheng, Shi Qiao, and Ma Ziqian came to the office together to visit the suspended Yi Changfeng. Just yesterday, all 4 of them had been called to the dean's office by Wei Tong and interrogated about the newbie contest. He wanted to clarify Xiang Beifei's true situation. This was the 3rd time this month they had been called in for a talk. Mr. Yi, the dean has already approached us. He seems to have quite an opinion about your teaching method and specifically inquired about our last training in the external desolate realm. Ma Ziqian was the first to speak up. I don't like turning my class into a formality, Yi Changfeng said. Wei Tong was one of He Siwei's people. In the school, those who supported Elder Luo had all been warned. He and Professor Guo were bound to receive special attention, and he had anticipated this. Who knows why the Alliance sent such an outsider here? Does he really understand the way we martial artists learn? Long Guocheng also had a lot of resentment toward Wei Tong. Ever since university students were required to wear school uniforms and cut their hair short, everyone had basically been assimilated. It had become difficult for him to draw attention when walking in the crowd, and recently his attention value had sharply declined. Of course, this wasn't so important, because he could still earn attention value from the fighting arena. However, the proud Long Guocheng couldn't stand Wei Tong, a literary Taoist, pointing fingers at the martial artists. What he revered were the strong, not the likes of Wei Tong and his SSR. Such people were a disaster for Zhou. It's pretty clear that the Alliance is suppressing Liangzhou University. Mr. Yi, if I'm not mistaken, this must have something to do with Xiang Beifei, right? Li Zimu was a scholar and understood many things without them needing to be said outright. What could that guy have to do with it? Long Guocheng asked with a frown. Shi Qiao muttered resentfully in a low voice. It has everything to do with it. The Alliance is targeting Xiang Beifei. They think that Xiang Beifei. She hesitated there, not finishing her sentence, and instead changed her words. In any case, they are being very unreasonable. Shi Qiao knew many things but also understood that some matters were better not spoken. It's been a long time since we've seen Xiang Beifei, Shi Qiao mumbled. After pondering for a moment, Yi Changfeng asked, You share a dormitory with Xiang Beifei? Do you have any news about him? Li Zimu slightly shook his head. I only saw him in passing last week, and I haven't seen him these past few days either. He's been practicing in the space all this time. That brainless dean came to our dormitory yesterday. He kept trying to force that guy out of the practice space but didn't succeed, Long Guocheng said. The practice space was a type of UR-level high-tech system, a sealed space technology created especially for elite students to practice. It was costly but very safe and effective, and it was hard for outsiders to disrupt the practice inside, which also prevented roommates from disturbing each other. Once students inside entered the state of practice, even Wei Tong was helpless to intervene. But everyone knew that Wei Tong would not let things go easily because Xiang Beifei had already been singled out for criticism many times by the entire faculty, and his base student points were almost completely deducted. The next step was probably academic probation. If he doesn't come out soon, he's probably going to be expelled by the dean, Li Zimu said. Didn't that guy qualify for graduation a long time ago? Long Guocheng spoke. According to school regulations, once you reach the meridian opening phase, you don't need to attend classes. The rules were changed at the last minute, Li Zimu said. Xiang Beifei's absence from classes was originally in line with the college regulations. But to monitor Xiang Beifei's every move, Wei Tong forcibly changed the rules just for him. Yi Changfeng sat down on a chair, contemplating the situation, a look of concern flashing in his eyes. Lately, Elder Luo had gone who knows where, with no sign of him for the whole month. He Kaiwei would show up at the martial arts college from time to time, openly and covertly backing Wei Tong. The martial arts college was already under Wei Tong's control. They enforced rules on all sides, making life difficult for teachers and students. Every day, the faculty and students had to put on a good facade, dealing with Wei Tong's inspections and doing tasks for Wei Tong's methodical system. This had severely affected the fundamental pace of the teachers' and students' training and instruction. If this continued, whether the students could become qualified martial artists was questionable. If this continues, trouble is bound to arise. Yi Changfeng's worries grew. Dean's office. He Kaiwei sat in his chair, leisurely brewing a pot of tea. Wei Tong respectfully sat opposite He Kaiwei, his eyes burning with fervor. He harbored a fanatic adoration toward He Kaiwei. He Kaiwei's tea-making method is orderly and meticulous. Orderliness value plus 189. He Kaiwei dresses neatly and appropriately, with dignified and graceful manners. Orderliness value plus 244. He Kaiwei's hair is combed without a hair out of place. Orderliness value plus 311. He Kaiwei's leather shoes are polished spotlessly. Orderliness value plus 199. Wei Tong essentially regarded He Kaiwei as his god. Such a UR-level genius awakener not only had high strength but also, like himself, was extremely meticulous about dress and behavior. In his eyes, He Kaiwei was a perfect person. Wei Tong's methodical system could increase the system value not only because he was organized in his affairs, but also from others. Being with He Kaiwei, every sentence he uttered, every action he took, harvested a large wave of orderliness value for Wei Tong's methodical system, and because it was a UR-level awakener, the added orderliness value was very substantial. How many people in the Liangzhou University faculty team are siding with Luo Yunxian? Have you ascertained that? He Kaiwei asked after sipping his tea. Yes, I have made it clear, and the list is all here. Wei Tong respectfully handed a list to He Kaiwei. These were 431 teachers who had been critiqued through internal notices. His method of dealing with them was simple. Anyone who didn't conduct their classes in an orderly fashion as per his teaching regulations was labeled a cohort of Luo Yunxian without discussion, to be warned after a notice of critique. He Kaiwei took the list and examined it carefully, his eyes settling on the section about Guo Zhenghong and Yi Changfeng, and seeing their punishment, he slightly frowned. The punishment of Guo Zhenghong and Yi Changfeng is still not severe enough, He Kaiwei said. Do you want to expel them? Wei Tong swiftly asked. He Kaiwei pondered for a moment and shook his head. Not yet. These two, one is a crony of Luo Yunxian, and the other is brought up by him. They are Luo Yunxian's enforcers and pose a potential threat within the alliance. They must be monitored and should not leave the school. Once expelled, they could no longer be watched. Wei Tong asked, then, what does Commander He think should be done to punish these two? He Kaiwei hummed lightly with indifference. They have colluded with Luo Yunxian and have created a mess in Liangzhou University over the years, causing abhorrent behaviors. You're reforming Liangzhou University now. Investigate thoroughly and you will definitely find their actions harmful to the alliance. If the information is verified, they can be arrested. Wei Tong hesitated. But it's very difficult to find evidence of wrongdoing for Guo Zhenghong. Even the nitpicky Wei Tong had to admit that Guo Zhenghong was truly incorruptible, with an excellent reputation among students. He had spent his life in teaching and nurturing, being open and upright. As long as it didn't affect his teaching or his pursuit of slaying desolate beasts, he was generally easygoing. That is just a facade he has crafted. He is a master of disguise, and the Su people are already investigating him. It's very possible that he is involved with the unrestrained. Do you think his constant presence at the border and unwillingness to join the alliance is because he is dedicated to guarding it? You are too naive. That is merely him carrying out a task for the unrestrained. Rest assured, leave this man to me to handle. A hint of coldness flashed in the depths of He Kaiwei's eyes. How simple it was to assign someone a baseless charge. When Eternal Sleep and Keishi went to assassinate Xiang Beifei last time, they disappeared precisely at the segment of the border guarded by Guo Zhenghong. He Kaiwei found it difficult to prove that Luo Yunxian had killed them, but he could strong-arm the blame onto Guo Zhenghong. After all, Guo Zhenghong was not Luo Yunxian and was much easier to deal with than Luo Yunxian. He sneered repeatedly in his heart. First, get rid of the people around Luo Yunxian, leaving him without support, then it would be easier to deal with him later. In the neat dean's office, the fragrance of tea lingered. Still no news of Luo Yunxian? He Kaiwei asked slowly. None. It's almost impossible to trace where he's gone. Wei Tong shook his head. Luo Yunxian was no ordinary person. As long as he didn't want to be found, it was basically impossible for even an awakener to track him down. What about Xiang Beifei? He Kaiwei asked. His roommate said that Xiang Beifei has been cultivating all the time and rarely comes out, Wei Tong replied. He Kaiwei poured himself a cup of tea, gently swirled the cup, and then asked, Are you sure he's inside? Have you seen him with your own eyes? Or has the roommate seen him? Wei Tong hesitated. No, but the cultivation space in his dormitory has been active all this time. I can't disrupt it just to confirm. Go and confirm it. He Kaiwei flung out a talisman, which hovered in midair. This can forcibly interrupt the cultivation space. But what if he's at a critical point in his cultivation? Wei Tong asked. In this world, everyone practiced a cultivation method. If one's cultivation was forcibly interrupted at a critical juncture, they could even suffer a backlash from their own spiritual power, with dire consequences. That's why the cultivation spaces provided by the school were so special, protected by UR-grade safeguards to prevent such occurrences. However, these closed-system cultivation spaces were ultimately provided by the UR-grade Awakeners of the Alliance, who all banded together for mutual support and were familiar with each other. Commander, he had more than enough ability to find the UR-grade Awakener who designed such tiles. You're still concerned about him suffering a backlash? He Kaiwei asked indifferently. Not exactly. Wei Tong didn't care about whether Xiang Beifei would suffer a backlash or not. But to him, damaging the tiles of the cultivation space and interrupting someone's cultivation was not a tidy affair. We must clarify his whereabouts. If he's cultivating, interrupt him by force. But if he's not there, then we must consider whether he's conspiring with Luo Yunxian about something. All we do is for the future of the Alliance, and those two pose a hidden threat to it, He Kaiwei said. Understood. Wei Tong nodded seriously. Although interrupting someone's cultivation didn't fit his system style, compared to Commander He's orders, what was the significance of someone as insignificant as Xiang Beifei? One was Commander He Kaiwei, a UR-grade figure of the Alliance, and the other was the apprentice of Luo Yunxian, who was shunned by the Alliance. The choice between them didn't even bear questioning. You boldly reformed the ethos of Liangzhou University. If anything happens, just come to me, and don't worry if Luo Yunxian returns. If he comes back, I'll be there too. If he dares to obstruct, it will further confirm his guilt of plotting rebellion against the Alliance. Yes, with those words from Commander He, I will surely bring a new Liangzhou University to Commander He, Wei Tong said with solemnity. After all, this month since Commander He Kaiwei had his support, Wei Tong had vigorously reformed the martial arts college in the way he envisioned, and all teachers and students had to follow the rules he set. This alone added 10 million to his orderliness value in just 1 month. That was a huge sum. If it had been before, it would have taken him several years to achieve that 10 million. Wei Tong respectfully saw He Kaiwei out, and only after Commander He had disappeared into thin air did he excitedly look at his system interface. Current orderliness value, 50001498. Orderliness value has reached 50 million. Current phase target mission completed. You have received additional rewards. 1. 1,000 orderliness pills, capable of forcibly organizing anything chaotic into order. 2. Subservience ability plus 5,000. Now you can make those in the later stages of God refining obey you. System mainline mission completed. With 50 million orderliness value, you can exchange for a drop of Orifice Transforming Essence Blood. The Orifice Transforming Essence Blood can help the host open a divine orifice and step into the Orifice Transforming stage. Orifice Transforming Essence Blood. Wei Tong's heart surged with excitement. A drop of orifice-transforming essence blood was enough to enable him to open a divine orifice and become an awakener in the orifice-transforming stage. You must know he was a practitioner of the literary Tao, not strong in combat. When encountering some unfathomably powerful individuals in the Alliance, he always had to rely on feigned momentum to elevate his status. He could feign an aura of the orifice-transforming stage, and those unaware would be stunned by his formidable presence. However, what was feigned was ultimately fake, and in the face of a martial Taoist like Luo Yunxian, it would be punctured at a touch and utterly meaningless. But stepping into the orifice-transforming stage was different. At least his power would be real, and while he might still be unable to confront Luo Yunxian, he could suppress others. He had reached the target today, and in just a short hour of conversation with Commander He had gained over 2,000 system points from him. It could be said that Commander He helped him complete the final step of the system mission. Of course, even if Commander He wasn't there today, Wei Tong reaching the orifice-transforming stage in a few days was inevitable. But what Commander He brought was far more than just those few thousand orderliness values. One could say that the 10 million orderliness values from reforming the martial arts college this month were all with Commander He's help. At this moment, Wei Tong was filled with endless gratitude towards Commander He. The Alliance should have more people like Commander He who love cleanliness. Wei Tong couldn't help but exclaim. Commander He had shown him great favor, and he silently swore loyalty to this important person, determined to cling to Commander He's coattails, serving him through thick and thin, climbing mountains and plunging into seas of fire without hesitation. And now, he couldn't wait to collect his system reward. Would you like to spend 50 million to exchange for a drop of orifice-transforming essence blood? Yes. Wei Tong was trembling with excitement. This was a thrilling moment. Exchanging for a drop of orifice-transforming essence blood. Exchange successful. Current orderliness value, 1498. The reward has been distributed. Please refine the orifice-transforming essence blood as soon as possible to reach the orifice-transforming phase. He waited for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 1 minute. Wei Tong's excited expression froze. Where is my orifice-transforming essence blood? Wei Tong looked at his empty palm and could not help but ask. The reward has been distributed. Please refine the orifice-transforming essence blood as soon as possible to reach the orifice-transforming phase. The system prompted again. Impossible, Wei Tong said hastily. However, the system still displayed that same line of text. Wei Tong started to get nervous. That was a 50 million system reward. If it was lost, it was almost like losing his life. He immediately crouched down to search under the desk, to see if it had fallen onto the floor. Nothing. The floor of his office was cleaner than the faces of martial arts students, spotless without a single speck of dust. Under the sofa, beneath the bookshelf, inside the tea tray, Wei Tong appeared crazed as he searched everywhere for his system reward, which was extremely important to him. At this moment, he even neglected the cleanliness of his office, moving books aside, turning his office upside down. It's not here. Still not here. Wei Tong felt his heartbeat almost stop. This was an unprecedented event. As an SSR, ever since his awakening system was activated, he had never experienced the system devouring a mission reward. Today was the first time. The SSR system, a very strong and perfect system, could not possibly have issues internally. So who could have taken his system reward? Wei Tong's gaze wildly swept around, then fixed on a stack of papers. Those were the files about Xiang Beifei. He was suddenly startled. It was this guy, He Kaiwei. Wei Tong uttered these words with trembling lips. The files about Xiang Beifei were meant to be presented to He Kaiwei, who had also been frequently entering Wei Tong's office these past few days regarding matters about Xiang Beifei. To satisfy He Kaiwei, Wei Tong had meticulously investigated any matter concerning Xiang Beifei at the university. He Kaiwei, being a UR-level awakener, had a system ranked even higher than his. No one other than He Kaiwei could have taken his system reward. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. And the angrier he became in his heart. He Kaiwei, you bastard. I have been so loyal to you, yet you You are such a person. Current orderliness value, 1498. Watching his system value drop from 50 million to 1498 without receiving the corresponding reward, Wei Tong's vision darkened. He couldn't catch his breath, and he was so furious that he fainted. Xiang Beifei stretched lazily. Last month, he had already refined his soul, but he was not content with just that because, as Professor Guo had said, the strength of the soul could be gleaned from its form. His newly condensed soul was very weak, practically just a miserable projection. So, he didn't go out, but continued to seclude himself for a long time, cultivating restlessly day and night. In order to increase his strength faster, he had also dissolved and absorbed a spirit sealing talisman he obtained from Lu Shanghui. The spirit sealing talisman was an item from the late phase of God refining. After being refined by Xiaohe, the spiritual power inside was extremely pure and vast. The spiritual power crystal from the late phase of God refining was a big tonic for a freshly condensed soul. Basically, very few martial artists cultivated like he did, unless they were from wealthy backgrounds like having a UR-level elder. Otherwise, they wouldn't casually use late-phase God refining system items to supplement their soul. Keep in mind, late-phase God refining system items cost at least 1 million system values, and even SSRs couldn't afford to spend 1 million system values so lavishly. It takes a long time to gather 1 million. But Xiang Beifei didn't care. Willful. Xiang Beifei absorbed a late-stage God refining spiritual power crystal, using it entirely to nourish his soul. Took him over a month to fully absorb it. What amazed him most was that his Chaos Yin-Yang formula seemed to cultivate the soul at an incredibly fast pace. Now, his soul appeared much more solidified, far surpassing that of Lu Shanghui. If he were to confront Lu Shanghui now, he wouldn't need to rely on the Dou constellation. A single punch would be enough to pin Lu Shanghui to the ground and grind him into the dirt. But a new problem arose. He didn't know how to gauge his own realm. During the meridian opening stage, he could determine his phase by the extent of the meridians he had opened, but this was not possible with the soul. Judging it could only be done by sensing how solidified the soul was, but he had no way of determining what degree of solidity corresponded to the mid-stage of God refining. The only certainty was that when the soul was refined enough to have a physical presence, tangible to the touch, that was the great perfection of late-stage God refining. Of course, the division of realms didn't really matter much to Xiang Beifei's strength, but the only issue that affected him was the Bull constellation. The Bull constellation is the asterism following the Dou constellation. It was sealed by an enchantment equivalent to the mid-stage of God refining, and Xiang Beifei's strength had to reach the mid-stage of God refining to be able to suppress it. If he couldn't confirm what level constituted the mid-stage of God refining, it would be troublesome when the time came to unlock the seal of the Bull constellation. The Dou constellation was already covetously eyeing him, ferociously powerful, not to mention the next one, the Bull constellation. What if he blindly attempted to unlock its seal without being strong enough and allowed it to escape? Forget it, let's first see what the Dou constellation is, he said. Xiang Beifei was truly curious about the Dou constellation. Despite the fact that it had been trying to deal with him, there was no denying that it had helped him many times, and he had long wanted to meet the Dou constellation. Xiaohe, come here, Xiang Beifei called out. While he had been in closed-door cultivation, Xiaohe had always stayed by his grandfather's side to protect him. Woof! Xiaohe puffed into existence from thin air, wagging its tail proudly as it played with a drop of red blood like it was a toy ball. Eh? Where did this come from? Xiang Beifei exclaimed in surprise upon seeing the drop of blood. Such magnificent spiritual power. The aura was so potent it even made his heart palpitate. Woof! Woof woof! Woof woof woof! Oh, you received it from Wei Tong just 3 days ago? He asked. Xiang Beifei examined the blood drop with interest. It was the orifice-transforming essence blood purchased for 50 million system points, equivalent to an early-stage system item of meridian opening. Good heavens! Xiaohe had pilfered someone's grand reward. Woof woof woof! Xiaohe grinned triumphantly. Right, he won't suspect us. Xiang Beifei nodded slightly. He had been in secluded cultivation these past few days, and Wei Tong hadn't been carrying out missions on him. So even if he suspected anyone, he could never imagine it was Xiang Beifei who had taken his property. But back at the beginning of December last year, just before they headed to Qingzhou University, Xiang Beifei had been too conspicuous among the 4SRs, and without any clear reasons Wei Tong had criticized him, marking him for a mission at that time. With so much time having passed, even if Wei Tong lost his belongings, he would never guess it was Xiang Beifei who had swiped them. Xiaohe, the courier, had placed an order long ago, now finally confirming the delivery. Woof woof woof. Xiaohe conveyed the recent events of the college to Xiang Beifei, including how Wei Tong had caused chaos within the martial arts college. During the days of Xiang Beifei's secluded cultivation, when Xiaohe got bored, it would run over to Xiang Beifei's side. Seeing that Xiang Beifei was cultivating and not wanting to disturb him, Xiaohe would stroll around the college, gathering information. That happened. Xiang Beifei hadn't expected Wei Tong to actually bring his antics to the college. How could he not pay a price for that? Well done. Xiang Beifei gave Xiaohe a thumbs up. Xiaohe puffed out its chest proudly, barking, "Woof woof." It indicated that Wei Tong had entered their cooperation list. In the future, whatever he exchanged, it would take for itself, teaching Wei Tong the consequences of meddling with the martial arts college of Liangzhou University. This SSR dean was practically ruined. This is just the beginning. A gleam flashed in Xiang Beifei's eyes. He was well aware that with Elder Luo absent, Professor Gua and Yi Changfeng had already been troubled, and many of the teachers who supported Elder Luo had been dealt with by Wei Tong. Both openly and secretly, the situation was very ambiguous. The alliance might send someone else to deal with Elder Luo. But it didn't matter. Whoever dared to come wouldn't just have their wool sheared, but be shaved clean. Shaved until they questioned their existence. Xiang Beifei clenched his fist. He didn't mind using the spiritual power crystal to nourish his soul. Let's put this reward away for now. We need to think about how to unseal the Dou constellation first. The Dou constellation had originally unsealed 2 seals. During the last confrontation with Lu Shenghui, another 2 were unsealed, leaving 3 seals remaining. The system items of Wei Tong naturally needed to be retained for future use, as they were for the early phase of orifice transforming and could not be wasted here. Xiang Beifei had trapped the souls of Eternal Sleep and Keishi. In theory, he could just hand these 2 over to Dou Constellation, but after pondering for a moment, he ultimately decided against destroying their souls directly. The 2 were from Su people. The Su people not only knew the secrets of Su Alliance's covert operations, but they also had knowledge about the unrestrained, making them useful to retain, perhaps to pry some secrets from them. However, Xiang Beifei still planned to obtain the spiritual power crystals from Keishi and Eternal Sleep in the early stage of God refining. Though they only had their souls remaining, they still possessed a system interface and could still undertake system tasks in their soul state. Unfortunately, even though Xiang Beifei had participated in Keishi's system rewards, Xiaohe was unable to directly receive parcels without the other party actively spending system values. As Xiao Shang had mentioned before, the Su people are loyal to the alliance and only obey orders from Zhuiji, and would not divulge secrets even in death, so expecting them to willingly trade system values was definitely not feasible. Therefore, Xiang Beifei decided to try another method. The souls of Eternal Sleep and Keishi were quickly brought out by Xiaohe. They were trapped in a blue bottle like little sprites in a message bottle, and were furious when they were released. "Don't waste everyone's time. It's better for both of us," Eternal Sleep said fiercely, staring at Xiang Beifei. "We won't reveal anything," Keishi also said coldly. "That's quite manly," Xiang Beifei nodded slightly. "To kill or to slash as you wish. Enough of the nonsense," Eternal Sleep said through gritted teeth. Xiang Beifei contemplated for a moment and said, "Then I'll take you to a place." He left the cultivation space. There was no one in the dormitory, and Xiang Beifei didn't care. He stepped out from the balcony and disappeared into the void. Traversing the void. This was a mode of movement known to most God-refining martial artists. The soul itself is born from nothingness, and to move instantly through the void, one relies on the power of the soul. However, the distance that the soul can travel through the void is limited and highly consumes the soul, especially for those in the early stages of God refining. If not absolutely necessary, most people would not choose this way of traveling. Xiang Beifei's current speed was about 5 kilometers per step, which wasn't very fast, but it was adequate as he sped above the vast sea of people, feeling as if the entire earth was beneath his feet. Shortly after, he stopped at the entrance of a neighborhood. "Do you recognize this neighborhood?" Xiang Beifei asked Eternal Sleep. "I don't," Keishi replied calmly. "You are from Liangzhou. Although you, as a Su person, use code names to hide your identity, it doesn't mean others can't find out your information," Xiang Beifei said slowly as he looked at Keishi. There was a flash of panic in Keishi's eyes, but his expression remained unchanged. He still said, "Do you think the Alliance doesn't have protective measures for us Su people while we carry out missions outside? Su people also have families, but their families are closely protected. The Alliance has special methods to safeguard the families of Su people. Those intent on investigation would not be able to find any information because they don't even know the real names of Su people." But Xiang Beifei calmly said, "Just with those UR-level protections?" Keishi frowned and said, "That's quite bold of you to think UR-level protection is a joke." Xiang Beifei didn't speak, but instead looked around at the neighborhood entrance and then walked towards a nearby park. It was the weekend, and many children were playing in the park. A little girl with adorable pigtails was playing with sand in the sandbox. She seemed about 3 years old, lively and cute with baby fat on her clean little face, looking very endearing. Keishi could no longer keep his composure upon seeing the little girl. "You? How could you?" Keishi looked at Xiang Beifei in disbelief. The little girl by his side had strong UR-level protection, making it impossible for even acquaintances to associate anything related to Su people with her. Yet Xiang Beifei, he had ignored that layer of protection. He knew the little girl's identity. Xiang Beifei paid no mind to what Keishi was saying, instead walking up to the little girl and squatting down, asking, "Nuno, what are you holding in your hand?" The 3-year-old girl, without any wariness, blinked her big eyes and happily waved a small toy, proudly saying, "This clay figure is Brother Beifei. I am also a little option." Ever since he became famous, many related products about Xiang Beifei had been designed by various toy manufacturers and were selling extremely well, although it seemed no one had considered paying him royalties. "This toy does look quite like him," Xiang Beifei laughed. "Right? It really does. I really like Brother Beifei. Do you like Brother Beifei a lot too?" Nuno naively asked. "Me?" Xiang Beifei glanced at Keishi, whose soul was trembling in shock, then smiled and said, "Yes, I am also a part of the choices. As long as you say you like Brother Beifei, then we'll be good friends." Nuno happily extended a pinky finger. Beifei smiled and also extended a pinky finger, hooking it together with Nuno's. "Let her go," Keishi roared through clenched teeth. Beifei ignored him, still earnestly saying to Nuno, "Nuno, when you're outside, don't trust strangers easily. Even if he claims he is a choice, he might not be a good person. Little kids must learn to protect themselves." Nuno blinked her big eyes and said, "But I feel that, big brother, you are not a bad person." "Me?" Beifei gently touched Nuno's head and said, "Then tell me, if someone wants to frame Beifei for no reason, who could he be?" Upon hearing this, Nuno immediately became indignant. "Definitely a big villain. Brother Beifei is so brave. Who would want to frame him without any reason?" "Yes, who would want to frame him without any reason?" Beifei muttered to himself as he stood up, glanced at the red-eyed Keishi, then left Nuno and sat down on a nearby chair. In the distance, a young woman was watching Nuno. That was Nuno's mother, but she seemed unaware of Nuno's peculiarity. Nor did she see him, because in her eyes, Nuno was still playing with sand, not talking to someone else. "Your daughter is very cute. I didn't even know she was my little fan," Beifei said. Keishi trembled all over. "She is still just a kid. If you have something against me, come at me, don't involve family members. How could you target such an innocent child?" he said, clenching his fists in shock and anger. Beifei glanced at him carelessly and said, "Before you came to kill me, did you ever think that I too am someone's child? What have I done to deserve death that you had to send 3 god refining stage people to kill me? You know the principle of sparing family, so why did you try to attack my grandfather while fighting with someone else? Your daughter is innocent. Isn't my grandfather innocent too?" Keishi was rendered speechless by Beifei's words. That day, when he and Xiao Shang were fighting, they were at a standstill, so he swung his knife at the unconscious Xiang Qingde, trying to divert Xiao Shang's attention by attacking Qingde. Beifei had never forgotten this incident. After a long while, Keishi deflated like a pierced ball and pleaded, "Please, spare her. As long as you spare my daughter, you can kill me however you want. I won't have any complaints, please. I'm not as tasteless as you." Beifei stretched lazily and glanced again at Nuno playing. The child was adorable, and he couldn't possibly harm such a naive little one, but he had to teach these two a lesson. "I'm only telling you a principle. Your family is your last line, and my family is also my line. It's better to leave some leeway in what you do." Beifei's voice was very calm, yet it echoed in Keishi's ears, making him involuntarily shiver. "I'm sorry." Keishi gritted his teeth and said. He was a Su people with his own duties, but he was also a father to a 3-year-old child, and his job was too dangerous, always living on the edge. He had hoped to work a few more years and then retire to spend a peaceful life with his family. However, circumstances were unpredictable. When he fought with Unrestrained, he did so without reservations, as the alliance would protect his identity. Yet, he suddenly realized he had provoked someone far more frightening than Unrestrained. This person had only awakened the system a year ago, yet his talent and methods exceeded many URs in the alliance. He regretted provoking such a person without cause. "Whatever you want to do, I will cooperate wherever possible, but there are many secrets I can't disclose. We Su people have our own ways of behaving, and the possibility of leaking information is 0. I went to kill you just following orders. They told us you were unrestrained and had to be eliminated. We just cooperated, that's the truth. I'm not lying." Keishi's psychological defense was completely shattered by Beifei's words. He wasn't afraid of death, but there were things scarier than death, like his daughter, his family. Now he could only comply with this young man before him and disclosed all he could. "You think I am unrestrained?" Beifei asked. Keishi shook his head in panic. "You don't have the characteristics of Unrestrained." They had been chasing Unrestrained for years and knew how to identify him, but Beifei clearly had nothing to do with Unrestrained. "Good to know." Beifei turned the breath soil in his hand into a sharp mud knife and swung it twice in front of Keishi, asking, "How do you like this knife?" Beifei showed you a sharp and rare mud knife. Knife intent value plus 500. "Good knife," Keishi said, surprised in his eyes. He was a knife user. Anything related to blades enhanced his strength. This knife, from his perspective, was quite powerful. Just one look had increased his system value by 500 points. "Of course, it's a good blade." Xiang Beifei looked at the system interface of Keishi. Current knife intent value 29521,642. He was very satisfied. Now that he had participated in the system task of Keishi, these knife intent values belonged to him. "I need a great Xia Dragon Sparrow Sword," Xiang Beifei said. To unlock the seal of the Do constellation, Xiang Beifei needed Keishi to act. He warned Keishi, asking him to exchange for the item and then to hand it over obediently. The Imperial Sword Saint system of Keishi was in some ways similar to Yi Changfeng. It contained various blades within. The abilities of different blades were distinct, and some powerful blades required special system values to possess. The Great Xia Dragon Sparrow, designed with encircling dragons, had a bird-shaped pommel. It was a very powerful sword. Holding it in hand, one could suppress all dragons, serpents, and avian beasts. Not only was it the bane of such creatures in the Outer Realm's desolate wilderness, but it could also restrain a certain group of special martial artists. As long as one had slain any beast of the dragon or serpent type or had dissected such creatures, They would find their strength suppressed when facing the Great Xia Dragon Sparrow Sword. The more one had made contact, the more their power would be suppressed. Any martial artist, as long as their cultivation level was at meridian opening, would have come into contact with such desolate beasts, since martial artists took dissection classes at school. Many had touched related avian sculptures, hangings, etc., and these all fell within the range of effect of the Great Xia Dragon Sparrow Sword. For example, Xiang Beifei had killed countless flying eagles and desolate snakes. If he were just an ordinary awakener, then the Great Xia Dragon Sparrow Sword, by normal means, could suppress 10% of his strength. Keishi's system displayed that this blade cost 9 million system points and was an item with the power level of the early stages of God refining. Among all the early stage God refining divine artifacts, it was the cheapest one, considered a discount for him. Alright, here it is. With hardly any hesitation, Keishi hurriedly handed it over, fearing that any delay might endanger his daughter. He didn't even consider why Xiang Beifei knew of the Great Xia Dragon Sparrow Sword's existence. He only knew that he had no privacy before this man. His family, despite all the layers of protection, could be found, so it was only to be expected that Xiang Beifei would know about the Great Xia Dragon Sparrow Sword. Xiang Beifei examined the Great Xia Dragon Sparrow Sword, its edge sharp and fierce, adorned with a pattern of a blue dragon, the hilt decorated with a vermilion bird. It was a complete natural masterpiece, its knife intent blazing. Even if he didn't know how to wield a sword, he couldn't help but exclaim that it was a good blade. And what about you? Xiang Beifei turned towards Eternal Sleep. Eternal Sleep's complexion changed dramatically. He glanced at Nyonyo, who was playing not far away, then at the despairing Keishi, harboring a glimmer of hope in his heart. But now, it was shattered completely by Xiang Beifei's words. He didn't know how Xiang Beifei managed to do this, but if the Keishi family's daughter could be found, then naturally his own family could be as well. Eternal Sleep said with an ashen face, "Whatever you want to do, I'll cooperate. Bring me the rejuvenating mysterious needle and the divine escape talisman," said Xiang Beifei. Eternal Sleep was shocked to his core. The rejuvenating mysterious needle was his system item, originally a tool for healing. When inserted into human acupoints, it could save lives and help in recovery. He had nearly never told anyone the name of his set of mysterious needles, but Xiang Beifei knew. This was also an item that cost 9 million acupoint values to exchange in his system. And the Divine Escape Talisman came from the Su Alliance as a life-saving item, also an early-stage God refining system item. He had been reluctant to use it, and now, unexpectedly, Xiang Beifei had found out about it. Here, Eternal Sleep sighed and voluntarily handed over these two items to Xiang Beifei. Xiang Beifei, without any pleasantries, directly took the 3 items for himself. No matter whether Keishi and Eternal Sleep were just following orders or had no choice, they dared to come to kill him, they had to pay a price. Woof! Xiaohei directly tossed the 3 items into the bubble. Keishi had been watching Nyonyo, who was playing with clay figures. As a father, his eyes were filled with tenderness for his daughter. It seemed she was his everything. Being in someone else's hands, his chances of survival were slim. Perhaps he would never see his daughter again. He took every chance to watch her. Each glance could be his last. Xiang Beifei fell silent for a moment, then asked, "Want to see her?" Keishi's gaze slightly stalled. He dearly loved his daughter, and even as a prisoner, he couldn't let go of his child. You would agree?" Keishi asked anxiously. 10 minutes. Xiang Beifei flicked his wrist. A stream of spiritual power entered Keishi's soul, like a shackle, binding him tightly. Thank you, Keishi said gratefully. He crawled out of the bottle, but looking at his own body, he hesitated. Then he wielded a knife and used the knife's intent to create an illusion, disguising himself with flesh and blood, so as not to scare Nyonyo. At this moment, he was not Keishi, but Zhou Zhenzhong. "Daddy, you're back." Nyonyo, seeing her father, hopped and ran towards him eagerly. "Nyonyo," Zhou Zhenzhong choked up, wanting to embrace Nyonyo, but then remembered he was merely a soul without a physical body, incapable of holding Nyonyo. Just then, a pile of sand floated through the air, adhering to his soul, quickly forming his limbs and torso. Zhou Jianzhong was slightly startled, looking at his temporarily constructed body. It was made from breath soil, as if helping him reshape flesh and blood. He tried to clench his hand and found that he could actually control the breath soil with the power of his soul, making various movements. He suddenly understood where this sand had come from. "Thank you." Zhou Jianzhong turned his head and thanked Xiang Beifei gratefully. Xiang Beifei just coldly twitched his mouth. Nuno burst into Zhou Jianzhong's arms, excitedly saying, "Daddy, look, the clay figure of Brother Beifei that Mommy just bought for me. I really like Brother Beifei. When I grow up, I want to learn from Brother Beifei too." "Good, Nuno. If you like it, then that's great." Zhou Jianzhong held Nuno, his heart filled with mixed emotions. The person Nuno liked most was the very target he had been sent to assassinate. Nuno had just said that whoever wanted to set up Xiang Beifei was a big baddie. But the innocent girl had no idea what her father had done. And more importantly, after his failure, Xiang Beifei could have easily killed him, yet he was still willing to give him a chance to see his daughter. All this seemed so ironic. "When can Daddy take me to get Brother Beifei's autograph? I really want his signature. If I could meet Brother Beifei in person, I promise to be a good Nuno who eats on time," Nuno said longingly. "Next time, definitely next time," Zhou Jianzhong said with a heavy heart. Father and daughter were talking there, and Xiang Beifei did not interrupt. Eternal Sleep also quietly watched from the side, occasionally unable to resist stealing glances at this young man. He did not understand why the young man would be willing to do this, but he vaguely understood that something was definitely wrong with the orders from above. The real Unrestrained would never give the Sioux people such an opportunity. Unrestrained capturing a Sioux person would definitely mean an immediate execution, because if you can't extract information, there's no use in keeping them. But this young man even let Keishi be reunited with his daughter. This feeling was very strange. Zhou Jianzhong was playing in the sand with Nuno. It was only when his wife, who was sitting not far away, called Nuno's name did he realize that more than half an hour had passed. He quickly stood up, reluctantly looked at Nuno, and then at his wife in the distance, who still had no idea what had happened here. "Daddy, Mommy is calling me. Why can't she see you?" Nuno asked. "Nuno, darling, shall we play a game?" Zhou Jianzhong said through clenched teeth. Yes, yes. Daddy, what game are we playing?" Nuno asked excitedly. "You can't tell Mommy I was here today. I want to give her a surprise." "If you tell her, there won't be a surprise anymore," Zhou Jianzhong said, trying hard to smile. Nuno shook her head energetically, nodding vigorously. "Nuno loves surprises the most. I promise not to tell." He sighed inwardly and said, "Then go to Mommy." Zhou Jianzhong stood up and walked towards Xiang Beifei. Back here, his identity became Keishi again. "Sorry, I lost track of time," Keishi said uneasily. The young man had only given him 10 minutes to reunite, but he had overstayed. Yet somehow the other party did not remind him, nor did they interrupt, just let him continue to be with his daughter. "Oh!" Xiang Beifei still responded coldly. Without caring, he withdrew the breath soil. Throughout it all, Keishi did not play any tricks, nor did he try to leave a message for the alliance through Nuno. He knew very well that it was unwise to do so. Xiang Beifei's suppression was omnipresent. He could not escape even if he wanted to, so he simply acted purely as a father playing with his daughter. In his eyes, this was the last time he could spend with his daughter. He did not want to gamble with her safety. Moreover, this young man did not seem as vicious and exterminating as Unrestrained. His daughter should be safe. "Thank you for giving me this half hour with my daughter. You may proceed to kill me. I will harbor no grievances," Keishi said in a low voice. Eternal Sleep did not speak and just waited with a dead look on his face. Both had prepared themselves for death, as Sioux people mostly encountered Unrestrained, and falling into Unrestrained's hands meant certain death. They were clear about the consequences and were not afraid of death. Their current predicament was not much different from falling into Unrestrained's hands. However, Xiang Beifei just snorted softly. "I won't harm your families. but you had better learn your lesson, and in the future understand what you can and cannot touch, Xiang Beifei said. In the future? Both Eternal Sleep and Keishi were slightly taken aback. They still had a future? You will let us go? Keishi asked incredulously. Anyone who could live would not wish to die, especially since he had a family, and a lively and lovely little Nuno. Depends on my mood. Xiang Beifei waved his hand and put Keishi back into the bottle, then threw it into Xiaohei's bubble. He had determined the information about their families from Eternal Sleep and Keishi's system logs. Information about Nuno, like her picking up a pencil sharpener or playing with toy scissors, all of which could increase the system value for Keishi, the Imperial Sword Saint, was written in the system logs. As long as he was interested in investigating, there was no information that Xiang Beifei could not uncover. Keishi and Eternal Sleep were Su people of the Alliance, specifically dispatched to confront Unrestrained. When they came to kill Xiang Beifei, Zhu Yiji apparently used his authority to tell these two Su people that Xiang Beifei was unrestrained. Any assassination task related to Unrestrained, they would execute. Unfortunately, they had bad luck and hit a snag. But these two people still had some use left. After all, they were well-trained Su people. If there's a chance to reform them in the future, Xiang Beifei may offer them a chance to live. Xiang Beifei had now obtained 3 early-stage God refining system items. Now was the time to have a showdown with the Dou constellation and see what this Dou constellation really was. He didn't immediately return to school but chose to walk through the void directly, stepping over into the region beyond the borders. Ordinary constellations would be under his control as soon as their seals were released. However, it was clear that what was inside the Dou constellation was no ordinary matter, and it wouldn't be too well behaved. If he couldn't subdue it, a fight would ensue, and the disturbance it would likely cause could be immense. He had to find a secluded place. Xiang Beifei utilized the identity he had forged last time, entered through a standard teleportation post, had his identity verified, and then was transmitted to the wastelands beyond the domain. Being quite familiar with the cultivated domain, he traveled to the eastern mountain area, crossed the vast forest, and reached the desolate mountain range where, seeing no one around, he finally took out the spirit-gathering book. As soon as he opened the page for the Dou constellation, an overwhelming aura burst impatiently from the constellation, swept up to the sky, and transformed into a massive Saiyan claw, its formidable pressure looming over Xiang Beifei's head, glaring menacingly at him. I really can't figure out, what exactly are you? Xiang Beifei muttered. The huge claw in the sky roared. But it didn't slap down towards Xiang Beifei, only menacingly waved back and forth. Although it had its 4 seals undone, being extremely powerful, it was still restrained by the spirit-gathering book, and before it was completely unsealed, for Xiaohei, dealing with it was merely a swat, of which it was well aware. Want this? Xiang Beifei presented 3 already refined spiritual power crystals in front of him and gestured towards the giant claw in the air. The giant claw immediately became more vigorous and extremely irritable. It indeed needed them. Boom! The giant claw swept down eagerly, trying to devour the 3 early God refining spiritual power crystals. Snap! However, Xiang Beifei unceremoniously closed the spirit-gathering book. Peace returned as if nothing had ever happened. Don't be hasty. Xiang Beifei then reopened the spirit-gathering book, flipping back to the Dou constellation. The powerful aura of the Dou constellation burst forth again, this time appearing even more enraged. This ignorant human. How dare he tease it? Stay calm. It's better for everyone, Xiang Beifei said as he lightly slid his fingertip across the page of the spirit-gathering book, speaking in a calm and leisurely tone. The giant claw frantically waved in the air and, taking advantage of a moment when Xiang Beifei was distracted, swiftly reached for the 3 spiritual power crystals again. Snap! Xiang Beifei closed the spirit-gathering book again. All was quiet once more. Then he reopened the spirit-gathering book. Snap! Boom! Snap! After opening and closing it 5 or 6 times, the giant claw seemed utterly exasperated. But this time, it finally stopped and didn't attempt to grab the 3 spiritual power crystals anymore. Remember, I am your master. Don't think about causing any trouble, Xiang Beifei said. The giant claw was filled with resentment. Give me a peace sign, Xiang Beifei said nonchalantly. Giant claw? I know you understand me. We need to first reach a consensus. Xiang Beifei tossed the spiritual power crystals, which tantalized the giant claw like tempting food. The giant claw was vaguely discernible with 5 talons, but it seemed to have its dignity, as making it give a scissor hand gesture was simply an insult to it. It swung around in the air, angrily striking at the mountains surrounding Xiang Beifei, shattering some hills and trees into pieces as if venting its rage. Circling around Xiang Beifei, it resembled a fly swatter, smacking every place by his side until the area was unrecognizable. But it just wouldn't dare to strike Xiang Beifei, because Xiang Beifei could merge books. After a ferocious flurry of actions, the hills and wilderness centered around Xiang Beifei were razed to the ground. Many desolate beasts were killed under its crushing blows, dying at the claws of the beast. The land under Xiang Beifei's feet was unharmed though, with a few blades of grass still vibrant and green, looking full of life. He didn't need to dodge. The giant claw didn't dare hit him. Come on, behave, Xiang Beifei urged, unmoved. Enraged, the giant claw struck another grove, pulverizing a few big timber wolves that hadn't managed to flee into meat pies before turning back reluctantly. The giant claw was enormous. About half the size of a basketball court in the sky, it blotted out the sun. I'm losing patience, Xiang Beifei said slowly. Seeing Xiang Beifei seemed ready to merge books again, the giant claw reluctantly twisted its talons, retracting the unnecessary fingers. Its movements were clumsy. Normally in a fight it would strike with a straightforward swat, not stretch out 2 fingers. But for the sake of the spiritual power crystal it still submitted. The 2 talons in the air looked particularly comical, displaying an extremely awkward and ugly scissor hand gesture. Instead of calling it a scissor hand, it would be more apt to call it a giant slingshot. Good, very obedient, Xiang Beifei remarked. Xiang Beifei tossed one of the spiritual power crystals over to it. The giant claw perked up, catching the spiritual power crystal and devoured it. A vast aura burst forth from Do constellation, as if it were repressed for a long time and was now eager to explode. The 5th star on Do constellation was also lit up. The giant claw solidified by a fraction, and this time even the patterns on the claw were clearly visible. It was hard to say what kind of claw it was, but it looked like a massive bird's talon, only much more domineering. Layer upon layer of wooden patterns on the claw resembled tree rings, circling around and around. This seemed to be some plant-like creature. At that moment, its aura surged once more, becoming even stronger. Every time a seal was broken, its strength increased, and this time it was at least 30% more formidable than before. This is strange. Also in the initial stage of God refining, but just by breaking through 5 seals, its strength already far surpassed that of Eternal Sleep and Keishi. Xiang Beifei even had a feeling that even if Lu Shanghui, Eternal Sleep, and Keishi, all 3, joined forces, they seemed unable to defeat the giant claw at this moment. It seems you are not just breaking the seals. You are expanding the seals? Xiang Beifei noted this detail. If other constellations were to have seals broken, it was only when a star's seal absorbed enough spiritual power that it would light up and the seal would dissipate. Spiritual power crystals merely provided energy for the star's seal, and the entity within wouldn't absorb the spiritual power crystal. But the entity in Do constellation was odd. It devoured the spiritual power crystal and then forcibly expanded the seals with its power. That is to say, it was something that could devour external objects to grow stronger. And it could free itself from seals. This thing seemed very strange. The giant claw became increasingly powerful, its sheer presence like a dark cloud over the town, making the air feel suffocating. According to Xiang Beifei's estimate, the giant claw now, even when facing Xiao Sheng plus Lu Shenghui, 4 experts in the stage of God refining, might not even be defeated. Boom! 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 The giant claw, having broken 5 seals, became even wilder. Having been sealed for so long, it finally got the chance to break loose. A single slap shattered the ground, creating a 10-meter deep rift. Then it continued swatting around, its once domineering claw now turning into an enormous fly swatter, smacking with glee. However, at a certain moment, it took advantage of Xiang Beifei's distraction and, whooshed, a swat towards him. It even harbored killing intent towards Xiang Beifei. Crack! Xiang Beifei closed the book again. The wild aura dissipated once more. All was quiet between heaven and earth. "You think I don't know what you're scheming?" Xiang Beifei muttered to himself. There were still 2 seals on the spirit-gathering book, clearly strong enough to subdue the creature. He opened the book again. But this time, the Dou constellation made no move. It seemed to have no intention of coming out. Only, Xiang Beifei noticed that it was clearly striking against the 2 remaining seals on the spirit-gathering book, attempting to forcefully break them. Unfortunately, it still underestimated the spirit-gathering book. The 2 seals were barely holding it. Of course, from the look of it, these 2 seals also seemed on the verge of collapse, as if they wouldn't last much longer. "Come out," Xiang Beifei said to the Dou constellation. A woo! A roar came from within the Dou constellation, as if rejecting him. It seemed to have become sulky. "Eh? Did your voice change?" Xiang Beifei exclaimed in surprise. "It sounds like a wolf howling." However, Xiang Beifei's words seemed to enrage it. A giant claw rapidly emerged from the Dou constellation, materializing in midair, and furiously roared at Xiang Beifei from above. "Oh woo! What breed of wolf are you?" Xiang Beifei asked, puzzled. "Awo!" The giant claw felt insulted. It soared into the sky, circled around, and soon spotted another surviving large timber wolf not far away. Perhaps to demonstrate that it was not a lowly wolf, it slapped down with a paw, killing the large timber wolf desolate beast. It then smacked the corpse of the wolf repeatedly, pulverizing it into mush, seething with rage as if to physically tell Xiang Beifei that it was nothing. "Like that? All right, I get it." Xiang Beifei felt a bit of sympathy for the large timber wolf. It seemed this creature had a strong sense of pride. But why did the spirit-gathering book seal something with consciousness? Couldn't it be like the other things before, something he could claim without having to subdue it himself? The reason Xiang Beifei provoked it was actually to determine the creature's strength after one seal was released, to avoid a bad situation if he couldn't overcome it once it was fully unsealed. But now he had a reasonable understanding of the giant claw's strength, and he had a plan in mind. Considering that the 2 seals were probably about to fail to contain it, he tossed the remaining 2 spiritual power crystals to the Dou constellation, saying, "Forget it. Just eat them. Maybe you can become even stronger." The giant claw perked up instantly. It seemed not to expect Xiang Beifei to hand over the 2 items so readily, but without giving it much thought, and fearing Xiang Beifei might change his mind, it hurriedly lunged forward, swallowing the 2 spiritual power crystals. Hum hum hum. A mighty and imposing aura surged in an instant. The Dou constellation on the spirit-gathering book couldn't hold back the creature inside anymore. The stellar seal was burst open by the giant claw, and then, boom! A cyan light shot up to the sky. In a flash, the whole area underwent a dramatic change. The sky was shrouded in cyan light, and the violent aura swept out in all directions, causing a deafening rumble on the ground, shaking hills and valleys, with all the desolate beasts within a 10-mile radius trembling and cowering on the ground. Why do we need to patrol the archive room? Who would be so bored as to steal from the archive bureau? If you ask me, it wouldn't even matter if we didn't come here for a year. Zhou Guan lazily cradled his head in his hands, following behind Sun Zhong. He wasn't very interested in the job, and he grumbled all the way. After reaching the 3rd floor, Sun Zhong patrolled past a series of rooms. "You have patrolled the N-level talent inspection department. Patrol points +2. You have patrolled the N-level talent dispatch department. Patrol points +2. Sun Zhong circled twice around the empty room with care, then pressed a button on the wall to ensure the alarm was working correctly before leaving the room. "You have patrolled the main archive room entrance. Patrol points +5. But just then, Zhang Xing thought of something, hurriedly pulled out his phone to video call his son, and asked, "Son, last time you said you saw Xiang Beifei? Look at this person, is it Xiang Beifei?" During the new student competition, although students from the major elite schools weren't present, the event was broadcast live. Anyone with eyesight could recognize him. Although Zhang Xing's son was a student of Jizhou University, he had seen Xiang Beifei before. The moment he saw Xiang Beifei, he excitedly said, "It's him! It's him! The genius who stepped on the SSR from Qingzhou University. Dad, you actually met him? Oh my God! That was a legendary genius. You really are that Xiang Beifei." Zhang Xing was also stunned. His son had mentioned the new student competition to him before he came home for the holiday, and back then he was also amazed by Xiang Beifei. He never expected that today he would coincidentally meet such an incredible talent. Sometime later, he quickly came back to his senses, excitedly saying, "He's definitely Xiang Beifei. My son is from Jizhou University. He's seen him before." Xiang Beifei put the matter aside for the moment and asked, "By the way, Uncle Kong, are there any houses for rent nearby? We want to move over." "A house? Of course, it's about time you moved here. The old man has always been saying he wants to save money for you to do tasks and things. How come you suddenly changed your mind?" Kong Daming asked. "Xiaofei has grown up. The house is too shabby, and he won't be able to find a wife," Xiang Qingda said seriously. "Ha ha ha, that's true." Kong Daming nodded. But Lu Hong disagreed. "How could that be? If she really likes him, she wouldn't care about the house. Still, it's better to live in a nice place." "The old house was a bit too dark," Kong Daming said. "Leave it to me. I remember there's a family that moved out on my floor, just 2 doors down from my place, directly across the street. Moving over would be good. It'll be easier to look after each other." Then, "When is Uncle Kong's restaurant planning to reopen?" Xiang Beifei asked again. The appearance of the one-armed crab, a desolate beast, was still unexplained, and Xiang Beifei currently had no leads on one person he suspected. Xiao Sheng, the one disguised as an N-level employee, an SR, the day before the desolate beast appeared, disappeared without a trace, and he wanted to see if Xiao Sheng would return to work. Day after tomorrow. The staff have been asking about it too. Speaking of which, I need to contact them. We've been closed for so long, Kong Daming said. Then I'll go to the wholesale market tomorrow. We've been cut off from food supplies. I need to talk with them again, Xiang Qingda said. Kong Daming quickly responded, No need, Uncle Xiang, you rest. I'll handle it. We've been idle for so long. A little movement won't hurt. I'm familiar with the place anyway. Reopening, there's a lot of work to be done in the restaurant, and many customers have made reservations, waiting for us to open so they can support us. You'll be busy enough. I can go tomorrow, Xiang Qingda insisted, waving his hand. Unable to persuade him otherwise, Kong Daming had to agree. When Xiang Beifei returned home, he purposely held a conversation with his grandfather in front of the living room surveillance camera, clarifying the reasons for his move and directly stating that he could now earn money and no longer wish to live there. For a Meridian opening phase cultivator, earning a living is not at all challenging. The person surveilling their home, as long as not foolish, would surely understand Xiang Beifei's current cultivation realm after a simple inquiry at the school. No one would doubt such an excuse. With this, the other party would probably move on to the new house. Xiang Beifei wanted to see who would dare to secretly install a surveillance camera under his watch. After saying this, Xiaohei then disabled the camera again. The grandfather and grandson packed up their belongings together that evening. Surprisingly, they had quite a few items at home. We need to call for a vehicle. Without an elevator, we'll have to carry everything down together. Xiang Qingda was considering the most convenient way to move. I can handle the items by myself. Grandpa needn't worry, just rest on the side, said Xiang Beifei. How can that be? You can't possibly move so much on your own. I am still capable of helping you carry them. Xiang Qingda was concerned that his grandson would wear himself out, as moving was indeed a laborious task. Xiang Beifei expressed a bittersweet amusement. Grandpa, why do I always feel like you've forgotten again that I'm a cultivator? So what if you're a cultivator? Many cultivators also have to hire people to move, don't they? Xiang Qingde replied. Xiang Beifei stamped his foot once more, and all the packed boxes started to drift upward, floating in midair, lighter than a feather, lightening the mass of the objects, then lifting them all with spiritual power. Xiang Qingde watched in amazement. I had no idea you could do this. Xiang Beifei also realized that he seldom talked about his abilities with his grandfather. He smiled, set everything back down, then glanced at the surveillance camera on the ceiling and said, Rest assured, from now on, I'll handle everything. You just need to rest, Grandpa. Xiang Qingde was stunned for a moment, staring blankly at Xiang Beifei. Once upon a time, he had always been meticulously protective of his grandson, safeguarding his self-respect, teaching him to be aspirational, and hoping he wouldn't give up on himself. But ever since the awakening had occurred, his grandson seemed to have changed into a different person, becoming diligent and cheerful. Now a cultivator in the meridian opening phase, he possessed the ability to protect himself. It took Xiang Qingde a long time to come back to his senses. Then he smiled. The awakening system truly is a wonderful thing. He suddenly felt old and in need of protection from his grandson. That was fine. As his grandson was so sensible, it made him happy just watching on. Moving wasn't a difficult task. Ordinary N-level awakeners, if they didn't have a corresponding spatial system, would need to hire a moving company, rent a vehicle, and spend a significant amount of money. Xiang Beifei didn't need to, as Xiaohei could create bubbles for that. Xiaofei is a big star now. We will all be relying on you in the future.
Kong Daming Joked.
Isn't being a star very tiring? I heard they have to shoot all sorts of films every day. Lu Jiwei said curiously. That won't do. Xiaofei needs to practice cultivation, Lu Hong said earnestly. Unconsciously, he had started referring to Beifei as Xiaofei because in his mind, Xiang Beifei was still a cultivator who should prioritize cultivation. Chun Xiuqin entered from outside and laughed. I won't lie to you. These past few days, I don't know how many calls I've received from economic companies. They know I'm acquainted with Xiaofei, and they keep asking about business activities, offering a lot of money to see if Xiaofei would be willing to sign with their companies. What did you say? Kong Daming asked. Of course, I said we'd consider it. How could I decide on such a matter? We still need to ask Xiaofei's opinion. Chun Xiuqin chuckled. She hadn't agreed to any offers, but neither had she declined them outright, always leaving the choice open for Xiang Beifei.